All right, and welcome everyone to this special edition of Ask the Experts. This is a 3-hour-long session. It's a virtual session, and it's meant to obviously answer all your questions. Not only I have a bunch of MVPs that will be joining us, but also have the leadership from the Microsoft, business applications product team. We have Charles joining, Ryan. We have Matt hopefully joining us as well, and we get to ask these guys a bunch of questions. By the way, these guys are donating their time and their expertise mainly to help us raise funds for the CDC Foundation. Obviously, we're battling coronavirus right now, and we wanted to do something to give people the opportunity to, help us raise some funds for the CDC Foundation and, again, help us in the fight with coronavirus. So let me bring these guys in and get started. By the way, before I do that, I just wanted to let you know that the link for you to donate is donate.crmmvpmedia.com. You can see it on your screen right now. So please go to that link and support us in this fundraiser as well. So let's bring in everyone. Say everyone. Hi. Say hi, everyone, I guess. Everyone is on joining us via Skype. Nick, Eric, Chris, Amy, Bruce, Auntie, Jim, Charles was on a few minutes ago, Ulrich as well. How you guys doing?
All right. Thanks, Gus, for having us. We're here to support the community.
Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, I guess.
I know.
Hello.
We have people from all over the place. Amy, what time is it over there? Like, I can see the window behind you. It's not even daytime yet.
The sun is rising. 6:15 in the morning.
Wow, 6:15. That's
Same
awesome.
for Bruce as well.
Thank you. Yeah, Bruce as well. Thank you so much for joining. And what about you guys from up north, Nick and Eric? Cold still, because it's been cold in Georgia, by the way.
Yeah, we got snow in the recent days, but today was sunshine and still cold, but we'll get there.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah, no snow up here yet, but I did want to let you know that I made the ultimate sacrifice in order to, keep my family from bothering me during these 3 hours. We literally, half an hour ago, brought home a new puppy, and I don't even like puppies. I really don't even like dogs. So we shouldn't be interrupted by my family because they're very distracted right now by this new puppy.
That's no excuse for you living in the basement.
Okay, let's set up the bet. Okay, I've got 3 new kittens that got born like either yesterday or today. So
wow.
Sorry, Nick, I got better.
I've got 2 really old cats, but they're all up for a donation too. If anyone wants them to take them off my hands, I'd be happy to do that.
I have a couple of teenagers up for donation. I'll take it.
That's awesome. I also see that Matt joined. Matt Barber, welcome to the stream today, the live stream.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Great.
Hey, Matt.
Thanks for joining. We have about 14 viewers right now, and obviously we keep growing by the minute. But I wanted to give everyone kind of a chance to talk about the event that happened last week. Right, we had the Business Application Summit. It was a virtual event. Lots and lots of great sessions. Before I ask the MVPs what you guys thought of it and what are you excited about, I want to ask Matt, and I just want to hear, out of all the things that you saw in the event and perhaps the ones that you announced yourself, what is it that you're excited about?
Personally, I'm actually pretty excited about the SQL endpoint, getting that out to you guys to be able to play with. Really focused around the retrieval aspects of it. It unlocks a lot of feature set and functionality that we wanted to bring to the developer community for a long time. And it really, if you will, lowers the bar of entry into the system, which is something that's really exciting to us, while preserving everything that we've protected for years, which is really around why we haven't opened it in the past. We found a way. So really excited about that.
Yeah, that's definitely awesome. And I had a conversation today with a customer. They were looking at the data export service for some of the reporting needs. They have some reports that have been using Dynamics for a long time. And once they saw the news last week, they reached out immediately and they were like, is this something we can leverage instead? Because they haven't implemented the data export service. So they were super excited about that. Absolutely. Charles, I see that you're online too, but he's on mute. So I wonder if you also have something that you're super excited about that you want to share with us? He was having some issues, so maybe he'll join us in a little bit. So I'll open this up to the other MVPs and see what you guys think about beyond the T-SQL connector for CDS that Matt was talking about. What do you guys see? What are you guys excited about? Ulrich, I know you've been into perhaps all the Power BI sessions. So what do you guys think about MBAS, and what are you excited about?
Oh, yeah, I can mention one thing there besides the T-SQL connector. There is the opportunity to do direct query in Power BI into CDS. So that's going to really change one of those, called limitation on really using Power BI in like an operational context of your Dynamics apps and model-driven apps. So that's an awesome addition. Can't wait to get my hands on it.
Absolutely, all of us. Anyone else? What are you excited about from MBAS?
Hey, Gus, it looks like Charles joined us again. You want to ask him the question again? Charles, you back with us?
I think so.
Yep, let's do it.
I don't know if you guys saw the photo I sent. I literally clicked the chat button and my computer blue screen. So.
All right, so Charles, what are you excited about MBAS? I mean, I know you announced some things that are coming up, but there were a bunch of announcements that came out, from there. And I was going through, one thing that a lot of people might not know is that a lot of the sessions from the Business Application Summit are available online. And you don't have to be registered. Like in the past, I know that for some conferences, you have to be registered to be able to watch the sessions, but they're all available there. So I encourage people to go check those out. But what are you excited about, from MBAS that, it's coming up? Maybe he blue screen again because he's kind of frozen.
It did. It locked up.
All right, Chris, what are you excited about?
It's hard to top the one that Matt was talking about there. I was really looking for that. But I do like all the new forecasting features that have come out. It definitely puts it in parity with some of the applications that are looking for the forecast in the tool. So I think that's going to help answer some questions that we always get asked throughout the year. But I'm not going to give you all of them. Let everybody else get a chance to talk about them.
Yeah, who's next? Who wants to talk about MBAS and what's coming?
Right, I'll go next. So, yeah, all the cool stuff have pretty much been answered already. So, to me, a couple of really nice things, that like a really consistent story between field service and customer service is something that I enjoyed seeing a lot. So, those two first party applications are sort of coming together and forming a whole. So that was a nice thing for me.
That's awesome.
Shall we try it again?
I can.
All right, Charles, let's try this again.
He smacked his computer and knocked it over.
Yeah.
I just it blue screened again, so I've gone to the phone. I don't know what that means for my computer, but Skype definitely is not its friend. So anyway, sorry about that. The most exciting feature for MBAS.
Yeah.
T-SQL without a doubt.
Yeah.
I think I heard someone else say that. That is by far the favorite feature I think we've shipped in a while. I'd say you have to choose your favorite children sometimes when you work at Microsoft for the product, but that definitely is my favorite child right now. So I think it's a complete game changer. And at least for me with a dev background, just so often I want to go dive into the data directly. And it's just so much easier to do that in SQL language.
Yeah,
with the joins. And,
I mentioned earlier that, one of my customers reached out immediately because they were thinking about using the data export service for some of the reporting stuff. And now they're looking at this and saying, maybe this is something we can use. But their second question was, look, I see that it's in preview. What does that mean? When will it be out of preview? Can we use it for production? Like, they had all these questions. So what would you say about that?
So that's why you texted his number.
Right.
Sorry about that, Charles.
I would say it's fine. I would say for broader rollout, it's coming in the next 2 weeks or so for everybody. I'd say if anyone is particularly excited about getting started, shoot me a mail, and I think I know a guy or gal that can get you into the current private preview. And so that's what we can do now. In terms of like going for GA level workloads, I say people should be able to do that this summer for sure. And I think it's definitely, there are kinks in it, so I wouldn't go do it in the next 2 weeks or so. But 2 or 3 months, I think we'd feel pretty good with people rolling it out more broadly.
Awesome.
The thing is, it has a well-defined set of boundaries that it supports, like read only and so on. So as long as you live within those bounds, I think you'd be good.
Awesome. And I just wanted to ask the people watching this on YouTube, if you have any questions, just go ahead and add them to the chat, and I'll be able to read them to the speakers. In the meantime, anyone else wants to chime in? Nick, what do you see on your side?
Yeah, I mean, it's really all about the SQL stuff. I mean, that's we've maybe known about that for a little bit longer than some other people. So that was the one I remember when I first heard about it. It was something where I kind of I said, guys, something cool is coming. Can't say what it is, obviously, but yeah, that's going to be as Charles mentioned, that's a game changer.
Yeah, Gus, another good one is the combination of model apps and canvas apps. You don't have to keep talking about the different flavors and what's this and what's that. It's like, no, it's all right here. It's Power App. Have fun. So I think that's going to be a good story from a learning perspective and people trying to put it together. Some people didn't come from Dynamics. They don't know about those type forms. So it just makes it a lot easier for them to understand what's going on there.
I think some of the stuff that was announced around the accelerators is pretty cool too. It's basically proof in the pudding there. Like, look, we rolled out these accelerators, these COVID response apps, these Power App templates. I think that was some pretty cool stuff. I've been seeing a lot of follow-up since then about being able to ramp up very quickly. It kind of shows that we talk about how quickly we can build things in the Power Platform, and there it's been done, right? And it's rolled out and live. I thought those are some pretty cool announcements.
Agreed.
Awesome.
I like the AI builder, kind of those updates to those models too. Supporting more, I guess, field types and more application. And I think that though, and not barking up that same tree again, that T-SQL. For context too, we had a customer who was set up with their Power BI team to do some, a workshop on how to get the data out of CDS. And then they heard about this too. And they're like, all our backgrounds are here are in SQL. Can we just use that now instead of trying to figure out all these other REST endpoints? And, so I think that's certainly those two areas are going to be a high level focus for us. So the AI builder, those models and enhancements within the Power Apps, and also, the T-SQL endpoint.
Awesome. All right, we got a question from Phil. It says, during MBAS, it was mentioned that there's a bunch of cloud services to facilitate T-SQL endpoint. Is there a lag or delay between the queries via the T-SQL endpoint and CDS endpoint? Anyone wants to take this one?
Yeah, and I think this is like is there basically like data replication lag? So would the data be stale? Is how I'd probably interpret that question. I'd say there isn't any. That's one of the main benefits of the T-SQL endpoint, as well as the direct query capabilities built on top of that endpoint, is that it goes directly against the transactional CDS infrastructure. Behind the scenes, we also have like replicas just for normal high availability disaster recovery, and those have like latency in the measured in sub-second, even if they're falling behind. So what that means is basically you'll be able to get a real-time view, just like you would inside a transactional app. And that's made possible because there's no data movement, no data copy, no data export, which is a big difference with the new capabilities.
That's awesome. Hope that answers your question, Phil. All right, Seth is asking, going beyond just the platform, can you talk about how the platform is interacting across the other Microsoft products like Teams?
I can keep talking about it. But I think, so I think one of the big things that we're doing is right now is we're recognizing that the way people work, particularly information workers, is fundamentally changing as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. What that means is people are going to be working remote and working from home in ways that they didn't do in the past. And even when we snap back to normal, which hopefully is much sooner rather than later, there's still going to be a ton of different workforces that never quite go back to full office life. And if you look at it, like Twitter just did an announcement today where they're going to be permanent work from home. So it's not even something that will get, So,
wow.
So basically that's a brand new news I saw this morning. We actually expect that to change in lots of different places and even places that don't have everybody work from home, they'll have more frequent work from home. So what that means is remote work is here to stay.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a foundational change of how people work, much like the way the internet was like 20 years ago. So we're going to go, so that's kind of a long way to build up to. We're going to put Power Platform all over inside of Teams because we want to make Teams be the natural place that you go when you're doing work remotely. So that means chat bots with Power Virtual Agents, data visualization and reporting and commenting with Power BI, automation and workflow with Power Automate, as well as application experience with Power Apps. And we kind of are looking at Power Platform as being the remote work platform for our customers to kind of go help them move to that new remote work world over the next year or two.
Awesome. All right, Seth, hopefully that answers your question. And by the way, again, for those of you tuning in, remember that we're raising funds for the CDC Foundation, so please go to donate.crmmvpmedia.com to donate to the CDC Foundation. Also, if you have any questions, once again, through the YouTube chat, go ahead and enter them there, and then the expert will answer that. We have another question here from Mark Carrington. Says, looking at the previous CDS SDK, will it support AD and IFD authentication? As an ISV, we need to connect to customer on-prem instances back to at least CRM 2015.
So I can take that.
Yeah, it's like Matt. Matt is the guy for that. So.
Yeah. Short answer to that is that going forward, we are removing support in the online world for the WS Trust Protocol, which is what the ADFS, the default way that CDS connected in the on-prem world for ADFS and IFD. Why we're doing it, it's been a very, very long time in coming. We actually were one of the last holdouts at Microsoft in regards to this, as far as support for this. So it is going away. Along with it is the organization service proxy. That's going away. That's been replaced again back in 2015 with another capability. So we've supported being able to use OAuth and JWT in the on-prem system for quite a while. Now, what does it mean if you are still having to do backward connecting? You have to connect back to, you have to write a piece of software that connects to online and talks to on-prem. So you'll be able to use and continue to use our API, our CRM Service Client API, our CDS Service Client API using JWT. So that is either service principals or OAuth-based user grant flows or user password flows. If you have a customer that just absolutely has to stay on WS Trust or WS Trust-based protocols, really, you should be having the conversation about why the rest of the world is moving off of that, because we do things like, the protocol actually puts your password in the wire in a form that can be caught by a man-in-the-middle attack. It's something that our online services built lots and lots and lots of controls around, which slows auth down, those folks that have experienced that. That we don't have to do with JWT because of the way the token exchange stuff works. But more so, if they have to stay with it, you're going to need to use the older clients, the older SDKs. And that's why they're up on NuGet. We're going to leave them up there for a period of time. They'll probably be up there for the next 2 years or so before we then move forward and start taking them down. So hope that answers the question.
Yep. Thanks, Matt. We have a question for Power Automate. I don't know if this is something maybe for Ryan or someone else later on, but I'm going to throw it out there. This is from Justin. Says, Power Automate related. And this, I think it might be more for Matt because he's talking about managed solutions here. Power Automate related, specifically managed solutions with flows that contain connections outside the CDS current environment. Any update when help is coming. Currently, you have to go into each flow and reforge the connections, which then creates an unmanaged solution layer.
Yeah. So it is not a simple, straightforward date answer, mainly because of the wide variety of types of connectors that live in the world. The general answer I can give you is this is something we are actively working on. There has been a set of new objects that have been introduced to the system called connection references that are the first component of solving that problem. You're going to see some new experiences light up in the solution import world that will essentially preemptively allow you to set those connections up. From an automation point of view, that's still a bit of a challenge. The reason being is that a connector that requires a user password interactive flow doesn't mix well with a behind the scenes silent deployment. So for those connectors, there's still going to be the need to have somebody actually log in the first time and pay the penalty of signing in that first time. For connectors that don't require that, that can be set up with service principals. Those are something that we're actively, again, addressing with the intent of saying, we want to be able to bake that right into a solution deployment. And if the service principal exists in the tenant, it just connects. Everything just wires up. And you're going to see some neat stuff coming out. We're going to start talking about that a bit more. I don't know if we talked about much about that at the MBAS stuff. But those of you that look around inside our API and our solutioning system probably will notice that there's a new entity running around associated to the system user table called application user. And that's where a lot of that work is going.
Nice. And I've noticed that Microsoft has also published a whole lot of ALM related content out there. There's a ton of documentation that Microsoft is kind of pushing for best practices, whereas in the past it hasn't been super clear, right? Or it's been like kind of obscure in some white papers and stuff, but this is a full-on, here's our recommendation on how you should do it. Where did that come from, Matt? Like, were you involved with that, or who worked on all of that documentation?
So it's a team effort. There's many different teams focusing in on getting that done. The motivating event, if you will, is the push that we're pushing in around the maker experiences and rebuilding the design UX surface, funneling that down through the pipeline as to how do you properly build a package, how do you properly build a solution, how do you source control, how do you manage that. We're now really starting to document all the learnings that we have from our internal teams. Shan's been really instrumental in that. Evan from the Power Apps team, really instrumental in that. And then in the maker surface, the administration side, the folks under Pair have been really, really focused in on getting that documentation lined out and into your hands. And that takes, it really takes a town to pull all of that together across, what is it now, 60 app teams that we have inside Microsoft that are building for our platform. So, and that's what we're doing.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right. We have a couple more questions. This one is for Charles. Says, Charles mentioned how work is changing. Has that change, I guess, impacted the roadmap at all for priorities? So based on the changes that we've had, how does that affect the roadmap for business applications?
It's affected it a lot, as I'm sure my team will testify as they kind of join over the next couple of hours. And basically, the mindset we've adopted is that if we aren't changing the roadmap and the priorities, we're asleep at the wheel. Because when we went and did our planning for 2020 back in January or February, the world was a very different place than it is right now. And that's going to be all kinds of what customers are actually looking for solutions during a potentially, I'd say, challenging macroeconomic environment, but also what it means for remote work, as well as where our customers are looking for the most support and help. So there's a lot of things that we've gone and deprioritized because customers don't care about them as much, and some other new things that we've introduced because we've heard very rapid demand from our customers. And like some examples of where we see a lot of adoption really quickly based on a situation are things like RPA and automation with Power Automate. There's a strong desire to go drive more efficiencies, make existing business processes run more quickly. Power Apps portals from a lot of customers who want to go and more quickly engage either citizens within countries or municipalities or their customers to go quickly stand up an end-to-end business process that way, or just general, I say, low-code development. And so I think we're seeing a lot of interesting trends and we're responding to them as quickly as possible. And I'd say we're going to be fairly fluid from an investment point of view as a company to go respond to those challenging and changing environments.
All right, I hear somebody just jumped in.
Hey, I got an idea, Gus.
Go ahead, Chris.
Since this is, for, the audience to get money and everything, I think it also should have something to do with wish list asks of our MVP, our Microsoft. do you think about that, Charles?
I'm sorry, you broke up. I don't know if that was just me.
No, I think
Everybody
it
else
was
is
all of
left.
us. It was all
Okay,
of us.
good.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was like, my curse doesn't continue.
So one thing that's been out there for a while has been the portal and the tool set of the what you see is what you get editor and making that truly that low code experience. What's on the roadmap in regards to addressing that, or will we see something in the next releases to do that as a part of this new roadmap change?
You don't like writing liquid templates and handlebars to go build out your low code portal. So I think I just saw a demo this morning, which is helping, like, for example, for portals to go bring a lot of additional WYSIWYG for theming and color patterns, as well as more templates and controls you can get out of the box. So you don't have to go kind of quickly jump into writing very custom stuff to make the portal feel very modern. So there's a bunch of updates planned around that. The long-term goal is we want portals to be just like the rest of the Power Platform. So what you know from Power Automate or Canvas apps or model-driven apps, where you can largely exist entirely in the clicks to small formula without having to go drop into advanced code. And I think right now for the Portals fans out there, it is the most invested I think Portals has ever been in its history at Microsoft in terms of engineering and product management thinking. And it's largely just being driven because the demand and pull from customers really is unbelievable right now. You see a lot of different US states, European countries using portals to go do things like COVID-19 drive-through testing, antibody testing, Q&A. So just tons and tons more demand, and we expect that to kind of continue. So that's why we're going to go keep investing to make it as easy as the rest of the Power Platform.
Awesome. All right. Related question to the one we had earlier about how these changes are perhaps affecting the priorities for the roadmap. We have a question that says, as people look to upskill during this time, how is Microsoft helping with the reskilling of those individuals? I don't know if anyone wants to take that.
I can add something for Microsoft Learn is a big focus for us as a company, and it's something that we're increasingly dialing up to go basically help people ramp up on the Power Platform. Because if folks lose their jobs or are looking to go change jobs during this time, it's the perfect opportunity to go do some digital learning from home. So we're really investing in online certifications as well as online content to take people from 100 level to say 400 level when it comes to the Power Platform. And Microsoft Learn in particular as a company, across all of our offerings, is where we're really putting a lot of energy at this time, because we again think it's something that's very uniquely appropriate given how the world stands.
Awesome. All right. Phil had a question, says, should we still be creating CDS custom workflow activities, for example, to use within CDS actions? Obviously, since workflows are within CDS, they're dependent on the .NET framework, but things are moving to .NET Core.
So short answer is yes. .NET Core, as we move forward and bring something like .NET Core or equivalent technologies into play for plugin runtimes, we'll continue to support the .NET framework capabilities that we have today. You saw us do that. Again, those of you who have been around with us for years, you saw us do that for a period of time. We do a standard deprecation. We provide sufficient time, sometimes ridiculously long amounts of times, and then we go through and do the deprecation or the retirement of the feature set. But .NET Framework's not going anywhere anytime soon. You've got several years left on it. The platform target that we're on is supported through the remainder of the 2016 life cycle, and we've already made moves internally to begin supporting the 2019 life cycles of .NET. And there's a considerable amount of work going on .NET Core as well as some other technologies inside.
Awesome. All right. Another question that came in, with more things moving to virtual meetings, how has that transition been for you guys? What was the biggest surprise? And what has been the best things about moving things to virtual events? Who wants to take this one? I think even the MVPs can answer this one, so anyone can chime in.
It's been a mixed bag. I think some people are disappointed and some people are enjoying it. One of the things we did twice now is a 24-hour event where we did a virtual event. People coming on 24 hours a day. A lot of people on the call today were on it, and it worked out great because somebody who couldn't make an in-person event could jump on, and we recorded them as well. So I think that goes over really well. Getting people involved who might not either be able to speak or attend gives them an opportunity to jump on and do some. So I think that works out really well. The in-person stuff is just a little bit different experience. So I think I have personally some mixed feelings on it, but I really like being able to get more people involved. And the reason we did the 24-hour thing is we covered all the time zones, right? This year we did 25 because it was leap year, so we made sure we covered that. So I think it's a good thing, but there's still some mixed feelings with it.
Yeah, I think there was an actual change in the overall formatting. The first couple of months or couple of weeks, we had webinars where it was like just looking at a PowerPoint and listening to people talk, right? And then when we got to Business Application Summit, you actually had the detail, but you had a person talking like you were watching them. And I think it made a big difference. It made that interactivity that even though you couldn't reach out and raise the hand and say something, you could type it. But at least it gave that closeness in there. So I think we're continuing to learn in this new technology that we use every day anyway, but we're continuing to learn different etiquette to make everybody feel more comfortable both at home and in the office. So I think we're all growing.
More use of Skype, that's for sure.
I think it's made people be a lot more creative as well. So kind of thinking outside the box of like, oh, I need to go and see that person to do something. I think it's made things a lot more accessible to a lot more people, and people are getting more confident being on online conferences and things now. So the people that maybe wouldn't have spoken up in a meeting a few weeks or months ago are now happy to show their face and chat. And I think it's really opening up some doors, as long as you're willing to be more creative and not just lift the event and throw it into online. You've got to change some stuff, like Nick said. And it's different. It's not what it was. It's a different thing, but I think there's some really cool things we've learned from it, and we can grow.
For sure.
And if I could add something on the Microsoft side too, like one thing, I think Ryan just put the chat, but basically we use the side chat extensively in our meetings now. So say we have like a monthly business review or a monthly product review. Someone can be presenting the slides and people can ask questions, which maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable enough to interrupt the discussion or to basically, like if it were in person, and they can get definitions and clarifications and even have conversations on the side. It actually makes it super engaging. And we've even talked about on my team where even when we're back in the office, we're going to open up the little sidebar for the meeting so people can have these side conversations, particularly for the bigger reviews, because it just makes it so much more productive. And I think someone said like being creative and thinking differently is so accurate. Like one thing that we do in our team is like we have big all hands meetings or AMAs, which may be like 1,000 or 1,200 or something people. We use this app called Slido. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, where people can vote up questions. So basically what can happen is while the presentation is going, people will be voting for the questions that they want to get answered. And it's actually far more democratic than what it would normally be inside of a room. Which is just a great way to go improve engagement over time. So lots of new, different creative approaches being pursued to go make us be hopefully as productive, or if not more productive, while everybody's working from home.
Well, the bottom line of things too, it just makes it more accessible for people. It's easier to put on. We put on a couple events through the Saturday events, and it can be pretty expensive. Getting fortunately, Microsoft's been great about giving us space, but food and all that fun stuff, and then travel, that's a big cost for the speaker. So it makes it a lot more accessible and easy to put something on. Still a lot of work, but the financial cost is much, much lower.
Oh yeah, and even for the attendees, like people who are out there in regions, like we have people in northern regions, they're in mines. Now they can attend App in a Days and sessions like that. It's way more efficient. And also, like it's not necessarily for events, but for actual meetings, they're much more efficient because now you only meet when you really need it. and only for the time you need it. You don't book like a room for a full hour or half hour. You're just doing just the meeting you need, and that's it. We're getting more efficient.
Right, and I think someone already said about creativity. There was someone. It wasn't me. It was another MVP who was saying that they never would have thought that they would have done an app in a day as a virtual event. And they did it. It was their first. It was her first time, and it was a home run from what I heard. So yeah, definitely people are getting more creative doing these virtual events. And I mean, I've always been kind of semi uncomfortable, being at the other end of the camera and talking to people that I can't physically see. I'm an in-person guy. So this has really developed me to be better at engaging with my customers and having to come up with things of like, I don't have my drawing board here that easily as I do with when I'm in person with my customers. So, small things that you kind of have to be creative with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there is a little bit of fear on the whole going virtual thing, because we saw that there was announced that all of the events, for example, for Microsoft, all the way, I believe, until July of 2021 will be virtual. So Todd has a really good question, which is, what are the thoughts on continuing this virtual events post-COVID? So let's say, I don't know, October rolls around and they magically come up with a vaccine or something that works 100%. COVID is a thing of history. Now we're back to normal. Do we continue these virtual events, or can we go back to being physical events? Essentially, like you mentioned, you're an in-person kind of guy. I personally love, I can't imagine, missing, or I can imagine that the last MVP Summit last year was the last time we all get to hang out in person and for 3 or 4 days talk about Dynamics and Power Platform. I really enjoy that networking, but what do you guys think? And I don't know if from the Microsoft side, if there are any conversations on just keeping this, whether coronavirus exists or not.
Yeah, I would say from a Microsoft point of view, it's exactly right that we've already announced that all events put on by Microsoft will be virtual until the end of our next fiscal year, which runs all the way to July 1st, 2021. And that's just to kind of create clarity around all of those events and prevent any last minute cancellations, which were very disruptive for folks over the last few months. And if I were to say, definitely there will be in-person events when we snap back to normal. So I think that I'm highly confident in. However, I would say I think there's going to be a much larger appetite and much larger pursuit of virtual events that complement our in-person events. Because I'll give an example for MBAS. We were looking over the metrics of our most recent Business Application Summit, and even not the most popular session at a given time window had more attendees who watched the whole session than attended the in-person MBAS last year. And that's just the reach is so much bigger online. So I bet there'll be a much bigger prevalence of online events going forward, put on by Microsoft and other companies, just because we're seeing how successful it can be. And some of them I really like MBAS was pretty, I would say, lightweight, relatively speaking. Build is a little more intense. I'm giving one presentation at 3:30 a.m. Pacific time. Yikes. Because we're doing it for all the time zones. But I mean, I think it's going to be around for a while. We'll have virtual events even after everything goes back to normal.
Yeah, or you're going to have events that are together, where before they never would think about a video on demand capability to have that event. And there was a lot of people that always said, hey, I can't make it to MVP Summit. I want to be a part of it, or I can't make Dynamics Communities, and we would record it and show it after. But I think what's happening is the technology is evolving to do it real time and have that capability there. So I'm quite impressed that the infrastructure hasn't collapsed in regards to all the video streaming and backgrounds and everything else going on. I thought for sure that there was not enough capacity to handle that, but there is. So that hats off to providers and planning, right, of what's there. And I'm sure that this is a big example for future planning on what's required from a connectivity perspective for these type of events.
Yeah,
Also,
and
side
to add
effects-
to that too.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it'll just all be the new normal, will be different going forward, right? Because everyone almost expects an online capability too, or even how if you run an in-person event and you're catering for online, you can't just talk to your people who are physically there. You kind of need to have a camera and engage that, or check for questions and answer the chats. But certainly has a wider reach. But like Gus said too, I still enjoy and miss the kind of the in-person events and that whole networking and just catching up with people. But I mean, it certainly has. You've had to kind of adapt a sink or swim type scenario. You can't just keep hanging on for the online in person. And we've got a couple of like app in a days which are running next week or virtually. So it's just moving with the times. But look forward to when things normalize a bit too in the future.
I think even if we do go back to in person, I think it's opened up some doors for people. Like my wife works at a small company and they have a lot of people remote, and she's worked with people for 6-8 months and she's never met. And I forget where I heard it mentioned on some call, and it's opened up a lot of different avenues for just having a virtual water cooler. And now she organized it for her team, so every day they'll get online for 15-20 minutes just to say hi, and they'll have 3-4 people, and sometimes they'll have 8 or 10. So I think kind of being forced into that, so you don't go crazy and get into feeling like a troll. You get online and you start talking to people, and she's been really excited how it's worked out. And I've heard it from other people as well. So even if we go back to normal, you still have remote people working that may not have a connection. And I personally went through it years ago when I first started working on my own, and it was tough. So it's kind of nice that we now have the infrastructure that's beefed up. We have people more comfortable with just jumping on a meeting. And, I think that'll go well with teams, just being able to jump on and talk to the team that you may not be seeing on a regular basis. So that's a nice byproduct of this, I think.
Yeah. Even I don't know if anyone else noticed, like almost the number of people who turn on the cameras has increased. Like at the start, everyone was just kind of black screens and everything. And then all of a sudden, as people get more comfortable, it's like, just turn your camera on. Who cares about the mess in the background, or I'm in my pajamas or whatever it may be. So yeah, that's been awesome too.
Absolutely. I do have one question because I know that Charles might be leaving soon. So earlier we were talking about, and somebody just came up here with I don't know who that was. I think it's Daryl. Let me see. No, I don't know. All right. So let's see if we can do this. So the question is, and earlier the conversation came about workflows versus flow, and whether we should continue to create custom workflow steps for customers, which is something that happens in a lot of projects. One of the biggest hurdles I feel from the technical perspective to essentially replace workflows with flow is two main things. One is the real-time nature of workflows, which is, it allows me to do things like don't allow someone to close an opportunity if they don't have manager's approval or something like that. I can prevent them from doing that. So it's real time. And the second thing is the insane amount of custom workflow steps that are out there in the wild. Like we have no idea what they are and where they are. People can create them and put them in place. So how do you guys see this transition happening? Because we all understand that this might be the ultimate goal. Maybe not, this year or whatever, but it will hopefully be the ultimate goal. We end up with one solution that does everything. But how are you juggling all of those kind of, I guess, blockers along the way to get the full transition to Power Automate?
Yeah, so I would say there's a few layers to it. The first layer I would say is absolutely our goal is to have only one way to do something. Because if we've learned anything from the platform, is having multiple ways to do the same thing is not goodness. It makes everything more complicated. People end up unhappy because they use the wrong way for the wrong thing, or the feature sets don't exactly match. So we definitely want to converge to one way, but we're going to do that in a measured and gradual pace. And it definitely isn't going to happen in 2020. So that's one. The second thing I would say is what synchronous or real-time workflows do today. We do want to start to, I'd say, evaporate some of that functionality into other concepts that exist in the platform, which are more, I'd say, low-code friendly. So instead of, say, having to go define those checks inside of a synchronous workflow, could you start to do them in something like a more beefed up or more capable business rules, for example. So some of the capabilities and use cases will drift into other features which exist in the platform and will get stronger in the platform over time. Additionally, Flow itself will continue to, I'd say, evolve to support more and more of the existing classic workflow capabilities in CDS or XRM. So like over time, I bet there'll be an easy way to go register .NET custom workflow steps inside of Flow. Like that's not something we're going to do for October of this year, but I know it's going to be a necessity for us to realistically move all of our customers over to a single workflow stack. Similarly, there are conversations about how can we make the existing Flow engine run in a more real-time transactional way, like what you see with classic workflows, and if that's something we want to go enable. So I would say Flow will get more and more capable over time to start to close those feature gaps. All of those things kind of fit together to go create a credible story for our customers to migrate their existing workflows over to Power Automate. All of that said, with the new CDS native actions inside of Power Automate, as well as the new solutioning support inside of Power Automate and the improvements planned for later this year that Matt was talking about earlier, all that comes together to get to the point where we increasingly want to say, if you can build it in Power Automate, you should build it in Power Automate. That's what we recommend. And as we add new capabilities, we're only going to drop some of those new capabilities inside of Power Automate, not in classic workflow. But we're not going to go force you over. And so for folks that have been in the ecosystem for a while, this should feel somewhat familiar with Unified Client and Web Client as a journey that we went through and continue to go through, which will only culminate at the end of 2020 after many years. I imagine Classic Workflow will be a similar journey, and that will be gradual, and that will first push new customers and new workloads to Power Automate, and then over time go back and get all the existing workflows moved over. So that's kind of the long, very exhaustive, very thorough answer. And when Steven, if he's joining later on today from the team, he'll use his catchphrase, which is in the fullness of time, absolutely, there'll only be one workflow engine and it will be Power Automate. But that's kind of the layers that we're going to work through to go make that actually be true in practice.
Awesome.
Can I add an add-on to that question? Because I think there's another question that I constantly get asked besides that one is, what's going to happen in the pricing model for all of these flows that have to execute, where I bought Dynamics with a built-in workflow engine and it did all these wonderful things for me and my whole business is running on it now. What's going to happen to my licensing is going to go through the roof. That's a big concern of the audience.
I'd say it absolutely will not go through the roof. And the plan as that happens is explicitly to make sure that Dynamics licensing will include what I'd say a reasonable amount of workflow, which would cover what anybody is doing on classic workflow today. That doesn't mean you'll be able to buy like a Dynamics license and do 10 billion flow runs a day or something. Like that will be capped. But what you're doing as part of any kind of at all 99.9 percentile normal use case for classic workflow would be covered in Power Automate for purposes around Dynamics with your existing Dynamics licenses. Because at its core, and this is more broadly, we really do not want to get our customers to have to buy 18 different things to get a solution to work. If you want to run a CRM workload, you should be able to buy a CRM license and it works. And only if you're doing something really as an outlier should you have to worry about any capacity add-ons. But that's kind of the heart of it. We don't want you to have to buy Power Apps. We don't want you to have to buy Power Automate. We don't want you to have to buy storage capacity or API calls. We want you to just be able to buy CRM and it gets everything you need.
Makes a lot of good sense there.
Awesome.
Yeah. And we'll have a 200-page licensing guide that explains how it works in detail.
Well, it's going down. Breaking news. It used to be 400, so now we're going down to 200. Good job.
Yep.
I just want to remind everyone. Oh, go ahead, Charles.
I have to drop, guys, just because I got to run it too. I want to say thank you so much for arranging this. I'm going to be watching it as I sit in my other meetings the rest of today. I think we've already made good progress working towards the goal.
Absolutely.
And thank you just so much for arranging it.
Thank you for joining us, Charles. And I think Matt was also dropping, so thank you.
I need to drop out as well. Thanks, guys. This is I'll be paying attention. Maybe come back later.
All right, sounds good. We'll be here.
Thanks, gents.
Don't forget to send in some cash for our numbers here.
I don't see the numbers, but get that page out of the screen. All right. So yeah, everyone, just to remind you, this is a fundraiser for the CDC Foundation. So if you can help us out with any donation, I see that some of it already came through. So hopefully we can hit that goal by the end of this session. So the website is donate.crmmvpmedia.com. That will redirect you to a GoFundMe page where we are raising funds for the CDC Foundation. If you have any questions, that's what we're here for. And I feel like we should throw something out there. Like if they can stump us, we will collectively donate $50 for every question we're unable to answer or something. We should just come up with a challenge right here and bring in some tough questions, especially because we have Ryan and he knows everything. So I feel pretty confident that we're gonna be able to get this. But I do have a question for Ryan, if he can answer this one. And maybe, I don't know, Ryan, if you have a camera or audio and a microphone, hopefully, because this might be a long answer. But I wanted to ask a question, which is, for most customers, for those of you that implement Dynamics, for those of us who implement Dynamics for a living, what we know is that when we work with a company out there, with a customer out there that wants to implement a business application, there's really kind of two ways to get to it in a lot of cases. One is you take a first-party application like sales or customer service or field service, whatever most like closely resembles the end goal, and then you kind of customize that. You drill down all the capabilities, because if you think about field service, I mean, this is something that SpaceX can use to ship rockets, right? There's a lot of complexity there, and I appreciate the fact that a lot of the work was done to ensure that any company can use it. So that's great. But then you have to simplify a lot of that solution and then add some other customizations along the way to get to where you want to be. Or you start from scratch with CDS and a model-driven application or Canvas application, perhaps a Power Portal, etc., Power Virtual Agent, and leverage that functionality to build from scratch, right? So you either build up to it or you kind of build down to the solution that you're looking for. So I wonder if the internal team of Microsoft has kind of a direction in how they're thinking about this. Are you guys leaning more towards you should be building up to the solution that you need, or are you more about you can start from first party and then build down to what you really need?
So that's a great question. So first of all, let me confirm. Can you hear me all right? And are you getting my video through okay? Sorry, first time I've answered.
Not getting your video, but you sound perfect.
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me see if I can restart my video. Just so that you get to see, how great I look today.
We all.
There we go.
They're awesome. Okay, cool. So, I mean, I'm going to give a classic consultant answer here, which is it depends, right? I would say this, as kind of a big supporter of the Dynamics business, as supporting our Power Apps and Automate businesses and running CDS. I want to see us build things that work for our customers, right? All the time, you guys hear me talking about my big 5 things, availability, performance, supportability, efficiency, and security. And so the thing is, I think that based on the type of application that your customer wants is going to determine whether or not you build from scratch or whether you start with one of the Dynamics applications as a baseline, right? We see cases where, for example, someone has practically recreated one of the first-party apps and then gone a bit above and beyond that. And the drawback of that approach is that it's kind of created a silo or an island where the investments that we make in the first-party applications wouldn't accrue additional value for that customer. On the other hand, we see cases where the off-the-shelf Dynamics apps have been customized so much that they really no longer look or feel or function as the original app does, really in any meaningful way. And so kind of the risk that you have there is all of a sudden that first party or that Microsoft functionality almost becomes a liability in a sense. And so, I mean, I would say this, there's going to be a bunch of scenarios where Dynamics application provides the vast majority of the functionality needed for a scenario. And in that case, it makes a lot of sense to extend that, customize that to meet the needs of the customer. However, there's a bunch of other scenarios where there is no app for that out of the box. And in that case, I'd encourage, our community to build those apps from the ground up, because that will end up providing the best overall experience. One of the, and I guess, as the CDS product owner, I can say that thing with no reservations because, my team is able to support both of those scenarios very well. And so I don't think we really have a huge bias as to which approach is necessarily best. I think it depends on the functionality that the customer already wants. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, so I mean, if I understand what you said, you guys really don't have any preference as long as we end up with the solution the customer needs to address their business challenges and thus creating business outcomes, right, out of it,
Yep.
which is great. I was just wondering again if you guys had any preference or another. I guess the next question and this.
Hey Gus, can I
Yeah.
add a little more here? So I think there's some other context that may be
Sure.
missing, or some of the audience is probably saying, well, that may be true, but there's other considerations that are driving people away from first-party apps and reasons why people are staying on first-party apps. The biggest one is the team member license update that's happened, and the fact that team member users that were able to access of read-only a big set of entities are now restricted to the 15 entities, or going to be restricted to the 15 entities and a single app based on their license type. That has made a big change in the overall direction of how people are looking at now, do I really need the first-party app? And they're even looking at possibly be rebuilding pipeline type of stuff, taking away from the first product, because they want to be able to get away from the licensing cost for someone who's just maybe a secretary that's entering in data in the background and support sales. I think that's one aspect. The other aspect you have is that when you look at what the platform does, most of the ISVs that are extending the platform, including Microsoft, are extending the platform using those first-party entities. So when you, for example, install Click Dimensions and it updates the contact entity, now you're forced to have to be able to use those entities in the solution at a high level that require you to look at, okay, if I want these third parties, and I think that's where Ryan was going, if I want those other products, then I need to make sure, like Microsoft Marketing, I need to make sure that I'm using those default entities so that I can synchronize back and forth. So if you go to a show and you see all these new tools and new features, and then you go back home and go, well, wait a second, we didn't use any of those entities, right? So that's another dilemma that's happening in the marketplace. I think, when we first, a lot of us come from Dynamics, we come from CRM, and this was our platform. It's now the Power Platform, right? But we're seeing the other viewpoint of people who said, wait a second, I can build my own data model. I can build my own industry accelerator. I can build my own thing. And that's great. And I think Microsoft is trying to have a stance of you can do either or, right? But it's going to come down to those couple decisions on the dollars, on do you need to have that connection to the legacy enterprise and get a part of those new features as they're released and be a part of those core entities to use them, is really where it's headed.
Yep. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Are there any things, Ryan, that, since you joined the Power Platform team and started working with Dynamics, that perhaps you look back at, obviously this is not to throw anyone on the bus, but are there things in Dynamics that you now see and you're like, if I could go back and do it a little bit differently, I could, or I would? Anything that you kind of have in mind that you're like, we should probably work on this, that perhaps, again, like I remember when, one of the biggest limitations to enable cross-browser compatibility, which was added in 2011, for 8 years, we only were able to use Internet Explorer, right? That was the only browser that it would really work with, or that was supported. And one of the biggest limitations was the service scheduling component of it, and having to redo all of that because it only worked with IE. What are some of the things that you notice, today that you're like, we can probably redo this a little bit better, for the future?
Oh gosh, so that is a fun, I call that a tightrope question, right? Because if I take a step in the wrong direction, I could plunge to my death. But if I may, maybe if I could describe kind of two classes of things where I think, us thinking if we thought differently, we could perhaps be in a better position. Um, and those are areas that we're going through and digging into and investing today on a regular basis. One is, as a PM, I'm supposed to love features, right? I'm supposed to dream of features and talk in features day in and day out. But I think that one of the things that I've learned in my time in Azure, learned in my time in Dynamics and Power Platform, is sometimes it is more important to have a smaller set of features that work really, really well, really, really dependably, right? Predictable performance, predictable reliability, so on and so forth. And so I think an awful lot in terms of how can we look at the surface area that we have today. Yes, we expand our surface area on a constant basis, had a ton of exciting and new announcements at InBAS last week, but how do we take the surface area that we have and make that like bedrock, right? How do we make it rock solid, super dependable? And so that's kind of like category one, where, us thinking differently, I think, is a good thing and will continue to pay dividends for the Dynamics and Power Platform ecosystems. The second thing that I would say, and this does feed into my first first point a little bit, is what does it mean for like our system to behave in like a very deterministic manner, right? Where each time you perform an action or operation, the end result is the same. And this is important to me for a number of reasons. Number one is it becomes much easier to teach folks how the system works and behaves, help people understand how the system works and behaves. And this is really, really important as we think about how do we evangelize, approach, and empower, the next, millions of developers on the Power Platform. Item number two is when you have that highly deterministic behavior, it actually becomes much easier for us to make the system scale and much easier for us to make the system reliable. And so I think that, that's another area where if I, with hindsight being 2020, I think we can continue to think, to look, to investigate and improve. So I hope I answered your question. I know I didn't say like this particular feature is the one that I would go rebuild tomorrow, but hopefully I provided you, with something there that's in line with what you're looking for.
Awesome, thank you. Earlier you made a comment about, or I think Charles made a comment about how the goal is not for our customers to feel like they have to buy a bunch of stuff just to get the solution they need. And David asked an interesting question, which is, what are your thoughts on making some features that Microsoft has developed for Dynamics available on an a la carte basis? So, like, for example, if you create a model-driven application, but I don't want all of sales, but I really, really like that relationship insights, capability or whatever it is, can I get just some feature and make that available a la carte? Maybe he's talking about scheduling, for example, resource scheduling or sales insights or whatever it is. Have you guys thought about doing something like that?
So I think I'll make a general statement here, if I may. Uh-oh, we're going to get a little interruption here in the background, guys. She's a cute interruption. Daddy's on a phone call right now. I'll talk to you in a little bit, okay? Okay, just give me a few minutes, okay? I need you to go out. That's my youngest, Audrey. She's 4, and she has a question too. But anyway, we talk about different options when it comes to business models on a near constant basis, okay? Because we hear feedback from the community all the time about how different aspects of the model are ideal for some situations and are not ideal for other situations. And I think I've learned a few things here. Number one is I'm convinced at this point that no business model is perfect for everyone, right? Two is I've learned that anytime you change a business model, sometimes in seemingly innocuous ways, it can be very disruptive to the community and the ecosystem. And so I think, what we are trying to understand and rationalize, one is where does platform stop and where does application begin, right? And then I think the other thing that we're trying to understand is there are a set of things that we deliver today that are very SaaS-like, and there's a set of things that we deliver today that are very PaaS-like. And what are the right ways for us to package those things so that people can purchase the capabilities they want or need, but without running afoul of, I call it the too many meters problem. And so I know I'm not giving you a very direct answer there, but I think that we are constantly thinking about how we package our products so that people can purchase the right SKUs and sustainable business.
I mean, isn't that effectively the same process you went through whenever you moved to the Power Platform, re-architected CDS to be the underlying database and all that fun stuff, and you kind of decoupled the solutions from the platform? So were you part of that? Did you have any insight into how those decisions were made?
I would say part of it is very similar, but part of it's a little different, right? In that case, it was like, how do we take things that exist and decompose them? But generally speaking, like the business model, oh boy, I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but like it didn't change that much in the grand scheme of things, right? We didn't move to a utility build model. We didn't move to a USL plus utility. Like we didn't, in the grand scheme of things, from a business model perspective, that shift wasn't the most disruptive. Some of the things that folks are asking for are actually potentially much more disruptive, right? Like, what does it mean to take part of sales insights or relationship insights, and make that available without the sales application, right? That's potentially much more disruptive thing, I guess, depending on how the capability were ultimately packaged and sold.
Awesome. We have a question right here from YouTube. It says, this is a great initiative. I guess it was talking about your previous answer. I would love to know how the finance and operation entities coming into CDS feature, what capabilities will it bring, and the roadmap that is planned by Microsoft.
Oh, that's a great question.
I didn't see a F&O question. I didn't see that coming.
Hey, I love it. What we talked about, just for other folks who are on the call and are watching the stream that may not be aware, last week we talked about how we are bringing F&O entities into CDS through our virtual entities technology. And so what this will allow you to do is to be able to build Canvas applications very easily against the F&O entities, build model-driven applications against the F&O entities, be able to use Power Automate actions against the F&O entities. Don't have F&O triggers just yet. That's something that falls into that forward-looking bucket that the question was asking about, as well as enabling a subset of Power Portals scenarios against F&O data. And so I view that this is really exciting when we think about the types of net new experiences people can build over the top of their F&O data. And also, I think that this is a huge step forward in our ability to deliver that like one Dynamics 365 vision that we've been talking about for the last several years. I also think this is pretty cool from a competitive differentiation perspective, because the ability to build applications that seamlessly work across CRM and ERP scenarios, I think is something that's quite compelling. And I think opens up a bunch of opportunities for us long term. So I hope I was able to answer the question there, and not maybe even answer that one a little bit more directly. I guess, from a roadmap perspective, what are the things that we're looking to do there? And of course, want to make sure that our quality is there from an availability, performance, security, efficiency, and supportability perspective. And then, of course, I think I also mentioned a moment ago, making sure that we're also able to bring F&O triggers or business events into CDS as well, so that you really don't have to think about or worry which connector to use for which part of your application. You're able to use the CDS current environment connector that facilitates that native connectivity to your data in both Automate and Power Apps.
A follow-up question to that was, would this replace dual write in the future?
That's a great question. So I don't think it'll ever fully replace dual write. I think there are always going to be cases where we need data to be resident in both systems. For example, for complex queries, complex joins, so on and so forth. However, I think there's a bunch of scenarios where that replication or that dual write might not be necessary with the virtual entity-based capabilities. And so, one of the things that I've learned over the years in the systems that I've worked upon is data duplication or data replication is evil, but in many cases it's necessary. And so kind of our goal here is there's still going to be scenarios where it's necessary, but if it's not, we now have a simpler, easier, more straightforward way to do it. But I think dual write's going to be around and continue to be an important part of our solution and scenario for a good long time to come.
Awesome. All right, great. Phil has a question, and this might be for everyone. He says, does anyone use a build environment? And he's using quote unquote build environment from source to create managed solutions as mentioned in the new ALM guidelines. It's the first time I've seen it documented. So I don't know if anyone is using a build environment. Maybe that's a question mark for like.
Yeah, I used it on if I'm understanding the question correctly, used the build environment as part of the ALM process to basically take. It's kind of the deployment middle tier is the way, if I'm understanding it correctly, the middle tier for dumping your solution. So we take from all the dev environments, use a solution packager, tasks, dump them out to disk, and then package up both from that source, both managed and unmanaged, and then deploying that to our middle tier environment is kind of our gold standard environment. Done that in the past, seems to work well. It requires a lot of discipline on the side of the developers because you could easily have some overlap and some customizations get a little bit hosed up. But it's definitely something, if you get your team on board, I think it goes a long way into automating your process for deployment.
Anyone else has anything else to add?
I mean, I could say that we do it at Microsoft. So
yeah, a lot of people refer to that build as the gold version. So you're basically building from your source code out to that, and then using that to replicate out to your different environments is a common process. But it's not a required step, but it's interesting that they've stuck it in the ALM guide.
Yeah, and Jonas Rapp answers and says, I bet Shan MacArthur does it. So
yeah, it's one of those things that's it works really well. Again, the solution package has obviously been around for a while. And again, I think the hardest part in that is the discipline with the developers and making sure everyone follows the rules. It requires a lot of check-ins because if you wait too long, then you get a lot of overlap. And those are some pitfalls we ran into. But it wasn't the process or the technology. It was more the discipline on the developer side. Myself being one of them who kind of blew up some stuff. So.
Jonas did add, it says build environments are still difficult/impossible to implement if you have any third-party apps or marketing installed, like marketing, etc. installed. Interesting. All right. Yeah, if you have any questions, again, everyone is chiming in on the chat window within YouTube. So if you're watching in YouTube, just go ahead and enter your questions in there for the experts. I know we have Ryan for a couple more minutes, so if you have any last minute questions, please go ahead and ask. And also all of you on the call, all the MVPs, if you have any questions for Ryan, feel free to chime in. Thank you, Jim, for stepping in earlier and asking a follow-up question that I didn't even think about. So that was good. So, yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and chime in. And also, if you want to help us with the fundraising, go to donate.crmvpmedia.com and donate there. We are $400 so far raised up. So thank you, everyone who has donated. Any questions from you guys for Ryan? No questions about CDS. That's awesome. So Ryan, how hard?
I can throw one in there, guys.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, from CDS, and I want to do analytics. I have the option of using Power BI data flows to get it in the Power BI data lake. I have an export to data lake option to get it into a similar data lake, Azure Gen 2 data lake. I also have a Power Platform data flows and Power Platform data lake. Seemingly very similar options, slightly different technologies. So any guidance, which direction should I go?
Gosh, that's a great question. So I think when it comes to Power BI data flows and Power Platform data flows, very, very similar technologies or approaches. I wouldn't necessarily say that I have deep enough expertise in the nuance between those two to make a great recommendation one way or another. But if we look at like Power Platform data flows compared to export to lake, compared to direct query, perhaps compared to historical like import or cached mode, and kind of the benefits and drawbacks to each one. So Power Platform data flows do a great job for like full synchronization of data between CDS and customer data lake, right? The challenge that we see is as data volumes grow, moving all of that data all the time is generally quite inefficient. And so that's where the export to lake capabilities come into play, where the export to lake capabilities is able to support incremental sync of data from CDS into data flows. Once again, better supporting those large data volumes, those sorts of things. When I look at what we have coming to market with our direct query capabilities, for lots of, I would say simple to moderate complexity queries that, typically would power operational dashboards or those sorts of things, we now have a way that you can interact with that data in real time and in the security context of the user who is rendering the report. And then, of course, we have, our historical, import or cache mode, which imports that information into Power BI directly, supporting, I would say, some of the deeper analytical capabilities that you might need, but where you don't necessarily need a data lake just yet. And so I hope I answered your question, right? We kind of think of this in terms of, roughly 4 different technologies, but focusing on slightly different scenarios. I think when we look at analytics, the complexity of queries involved, and the variety of data volumes in question, it's one of those places that I think Charles actually said this earlier, trying to have one solution that meets all requirements is probably not ultimately going to be successful. And so we have, a set of options that hopefully between those will help you and your customers be successful. So did I answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Close enough.
Close enough.
All right,
yeah,
Ryan,
and
so
any guys to say when do I make a jump to the data lake as opposed to using the direct options?
Oh gosh. So when we see people doing this quite a bit is when they're looking to post-process data before they bring it into their analytical service of choice, or also when they are looking to commingle data from a bunch of different sources before they bring that data into Power BI. So kind of, think about, those are the 2 main scenarios, like enrichment scenarios or multiple data source scenarios.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, and so I know you have to go pretty soon, but I'm going to ask, are there any hidden features about CDS that most people don't know about Like, for example, I got this question today. Is there any way I can add a store procedure to my CDS database, right? So are there any things like that most people don't know about CDS that you want to share with everyone?
Oh gosh. So what I would say is this: every day I come to work and I learn about a new feature that's in CDS somewhere. Okay. Like literally every day I discover a new feature in this product. And of course, you guys, many of you MVPs, you've been working with this product longer than I have. And so, you may be like, oh, that Ryan guy, I've known about that for a long time. He knows nothing. But I think what's interesting is this product and this platform is so broad. And I think what's very interesting to me is one, like discovering new capabilities on a day-to-day basis. But then item number two is looking at capabilities in a new or a different light, if that makes sense. And so like one of the things that's actually very interesting to me right now is I think the way that we use custom actions and the way that we leverage them for integration patterns with Flow and with our Event Hub and Service Bus capabilities. I think that's something that we actually under leverage today, where there's an entirely new class of applications that could be built or improved if we simply looked at that capability in a different light and leveraged it in a different way. And so that I would say is kind of, the thing that I find exciting, is just every day seeing new capabilities. And then because there are so many of them in the product today, looking at new ways that we can leverage them to light up new types of applications.
That's awesome. All right, final question. I promise. Before you go, and I have to pick Jonas's question because it's late, but I'm going to try to translate because I think it's too late and this doesn't seem like English. So he says, cloning a clean environment. No, hold on. That's not his. Okay, here we go. It says, we don't have the solutions for those third parties, etc., available only through app source, which is not possible to include in build pipelines. What's the future for that, Ryan?
Oh gosh.
And he was talking about the whole how difficult or impossible it is to implement with any third-party apps.
That's a good question, and I don't know if I have an answer for it. But that is, I could definitely follow up and get an answer for you.
So you just stumped. Jonas just stumped Ryan. Is that what we just heard?
It sounds like it. Sounds like I'm $50. We're $50 out of pocket for the donation. But yeah, Phil tried to answer. He says cloning a clean environment with just third-party apps installed might be a workaround, but I mean, quite a few clean environments may have be needed. Thoughts? He's asking about that. So anyway, Jonas, I don't know if he stumped Ryan or if it's just his question makes no sense. I'm gonna say it's a little bit of both. But yeah.
We vote no sense.
I'm fine to say I'm stumped, guys. Anything to help out the CDC.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Ryan, so much for joining us today. And again, we still have about an hour and a half to go. So if you want to join back in, just feel free to jump in. Answer some more questions.
If I can, I will. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Take care, man. And have a good one.
Thanks, Ryan.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for all the awesome questions, by the way, so far. Keep bringing it, though. There's still several MVPs. Amy has all day. Like, literally. It's like 7:30 in the morning in Australia. Like, she'll be here for 8 hours if needed.
The day is good. The day is very young. Bring it on.
She even changed rooms and everything. Like, she has multiple sets. It's awesome. This is
as long as the donation.
So well, I got a question that I've heard and I don't have an answer for a couple of times. Is the proposed how long will on-prem Dynamics be around? Because I think the current version is 9.0, right? And somebody asked this, can't remember, and I always wonder myself, and I don't know if anybody here knows, is what is the likelihood that's going to stick around much longer? When's the next update? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that to Charles as well, and unfortunately he had to leave because I mean, I was gonna straight up ask, which I asked to James as well, last time, and it was a while ago, so I was wondering if there was a new answer. Last time I asked this, James said, "Look, there's currently no plans to to get rid of on-prem or turn it down in any way, right?" But that was a while ago, so I wonder if something has changed. Like, they should just go full on. I mean, it's no secret that I believe they should just go full like Apple with the headphone jack, berserk iPhone 10 thing. Like, just get rid of it and hope for the best. That's what I think they should do. But I wanted to hear from Charles and see what he
Yeah,
thought.
but saying there's no
There's a
plans to
segment.
shut it off doesn't mean there's plans to keep upgrading it, right?
Yeah,
There's not. It's not the same thing.
Right.
As long as there's a segment there to support it, and they can continue doing what they've been doing, which obviously they has not gotten a lot of the parity updates as online has, right? As long as they keep doing that, they're the only platform that has it. Everybody else has gone cloud. So there are some scragglers out there that are in certain industries where there's risk to them to have their data online, no matter what security they have. They just don't want to do it. And it's getting smaller and smaller by the day. I mean, Gus, I don't know, have you used the fast track tool yet?
I have not. No.
This thing is absolutely amazing. If you're migrating from online to online from on-premise, in the past, we had to take, let's say if you're on 2013, we had to upgrade you to 2015, do data mappings or build a Kingsway soft integration to get you. This thing takes your database and walks it through all the steps and brings it into a sandbox where all you got to do is fix your customizations and then move to production. It's all the problems we used to have with the data migrations and the mapping of the fields and the date changes and the time problems and all that stuff is gone. And really what it is to us is moving the SQL database, right? That's what we always wanted to do. So these series of checks allow you to go through that process. Unfortunately, you have to be a pretty big client or partner to be able to use the process. It's not going to work for 25 or 50 user seat. But it's a great process, and again, it's part of Microsoft's commitment on moving and helping you move to the cloud.
Well, it sounds like they're removing roadblocks, but I still see the reason I heard it. I think last time I heard it was Ignite in DC, where it was focused on government space, right? And talked to somebody there who, they were a big integrator, and same issue with SharePoint. They cannot get off of SharePoint on-prem because they got the data centers set up. They will not move them because of security, whatever the rules are. You could argue whether it's crazy or not, but you've got customers who are pretty large and have that requirement. And I was wondering about the dynamic side, and I haven't heard an answer, so I don't think anybody really knows. But it sounds like they're trying to remove the roadblocks to get you online.
Let me see. Can you see a window in a window? Can you see my screen?
No, you have blurred the background.
It won't do it. Okay.
I have used Fast Track, but before they had the tool out, just like working with the team and coordinating, the migration. I've done that a few times, but never like with the actual tool. That sounds pretty cool.
It's amazing. I mean, it spins up all the different VMs, all the stuff in your Azure resources. Here's another thing. You don't have to give your data to Microsoft. It's in your Azure account, right? So your subscription, your access, hats off to the guys. I mean, and I was pretty efficient at, I had my VMs and I'd walk it all the way through, but it's not even worth it anymore.
That's awesome. One thing I wanted to ask though, has any of you played with a T-SQL connector thing? Like, I know it's on their private preview or whatever. You have to be invited. I have not. I've only seen screenshots just like everyone else, but have you guys had a chance to play with it? I mean, it straight up adds it as a database in SQL Studio.
Yeah.
So it just
should
looks
be no
to me
different.
Looks to me like you can do backups. You can do it looks like a just regular on-prem database inside of. So I don't know what's possible with it. I'm just curious if any of you played with that yet.
I'm wondering if it is the whole client, Gus, like the control client that you can just connect to it. SQL Server, I forgot what they call it, Studio Management Studio.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's that whole client just works right against the SQL endpoint.
Well, not everything will work on it though, because I mean they say it's only for read currently, so you can't you can't do certain update statements on it, so you'll get errors,
Right.
I'm sure. So I'm guessing they've implemented whatever the requirements are in order to get those reads to work in all their interactions. But if you try to back up the database or do something else, it's probably going to throw you an error. That's my guess.
Yep. I mean, you know, that's Gus. You brought up a good point, though. There's so much change going on, right? We talked about this. I don't know how long ago we talked about it, but back in 2004, when we were CRM3, CRM4, you knew the whole system. You knew everything about it. You were truly an MVP.
All of it.
That doesn't exist today anymore. I mean, there's so many different avenues of items, and their specializations, whether it's Power Apps or Flow or Power BI, or, you know, you're in the sales aspect, you're in PSA, you're in field service, industry accelerators. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Like even small pieces of it that I consider to be small pieces, like portals. So, like for example, Nick, who I consider to be perhaps the world's best expert about portals. Nick, do you think you know everything there is to be known about portals?
No, well, of course not. Even if I thought I did, I couldn't say that right now. But I feel like where I'm at with portals is probably close to where I, used to be able to be at with CRM4. So you can know 95. Yes, you're learning stuff new all the time, but yeah, you can kind of know the vast majority. But outside of portals, like don't. The other day, Joel Lindstrom was helping me how to do something simple like tracking a contact in the Outlook client. I had no idea how to do that because my clients don't know how to do that, or don't generally need to do that because they're working with portals. And so he had to show me this is this crazy extra button that you have to click the add-in button, and then it opens up this other window and to track a contact. So something as simple as that, I was struggling just to figure out something simple because it wasn't in my one little area of expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, I want to reiterate, those of you still watching, if you have any questions for the MVPs, bring it on. I have a few questions that I got via text message. They're non-technical, so I wanted to save them for you guys and try to take advantage of the fact that Ryan and Charles and Matt were on the call. So, but yeah, if you have any other questions for the other MVPs, I think Amy, you wanted to say something.
I was going to say, you brought up a feature. I think I was thinking on-prem is one of these things that will just never die. Because it's hard to turn off. And then you brought up the other one, which is that CRM add-in for Outlook. It will never die. It needs to die. It needs to go.
In 40 years, we'll have another global pandemic, and there will be a cry out from the government of the United States to say, we need on-prem CRM developers that know how to work in 2011. And we'll have to come out of retirement. Jim's going to have to... He's going to have to come back, start his business up again, and work in that space again. Because if history will repeat itself, it will repeat itself. Yes.
And it's funny too. I mean, your point about not knowing something you feel like you should know, or other people might think is so simple. I've got a question today from somebody about the unified interface. Client-side object model, and I've been working in portals for a little while now, focusing on that, and I'm like, oh, I'm really getting up to speed on that. Then I'm like, holy cow, I don't know the answer to this question, and it wasn't a big deal, but it made me realize, I'm like, you get rusty very quickly if you're not doing everything, but you can't do everything, So it's the stuff coming out. I think your points are well taken. That there's so much coming out so quickly and so broad in terms of what you get with a platform. It's almost impossible to keep up.
I mean, it's still today. I even find things that I ask around, have you guys seen this? Have you noticed this? And somebody will be like, yeah, that's been there for 3 months, and I just can't even notice it.
Every day of my life, and she's like, yeah, it's been there for a year. I'm like, what? That's amazing.
Exactly. All right, so I do have a question again that came via text message, and this is for all of you. I know somebody, Nick was talking about the fact that he got a puppy just so his kids leave him alone, and I know that Eric mentioned he has a bunch.
To be clear, mostly my wife leaves me alone, but yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
That's important. And but the question came and says, in addition to dogs and cats, how are you guys coping with mental health? If you're staying at home all the time, I know for me, I've been working from home since 2014, so not a whole lot has changed. The only thing is I do tend to go scuba diving once in a while, and you can see I have to shave to go scuba diving. So you can see my face. I haven't been diving in a long time. So I miss that. But how are you guys coping with, staying at home and kind of struggling with social isolation?
Go
So
on,
you know
I'll
me.
start.
Go ahead, Amy.
Go on. At first, I completely freaked out. I freaked out like 2 weeks before anyone else realized to freak out. I do this all the time. I freak out before anyone's realized to freak out. So then by the time it happened, I was like, oh, okay. I was horrified at first that the gym was going to close. And then I realized actually I quite like it because I don't have to give people excuses as to why I don't want to hang out with them. And it's now cool to be an introvert.
Nice.
I've been
getting out, doing some exercise every day, and just making a new normal, and just accepting that it's okay just to sit in your house and do nothing.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I've been working on some vintage restoration for some old school stand-up jet skis, like the 1975, 76 jet skis. So, get out in the back, start working on them, and tinkering with the hands. That's always been my brain to do something like that, to break apart. So, flipped a few, made a couple dollars, and bought a couple more. So it's been some fun to do on the side. Trying to be around with the kids. I mean, it's funny because you see those pictures on TV where everybody's on a device like this, and now you look around and everybody's riding bicycles and playing outside and doing things. So it's definitely a different perspective on life, awakening for everybody.
Nice. So vintage jet ski. Those are the ones that explode upon impact. So that's pretty cool. Daryl, how about you?
Well, I think I'm in the same bucket as you are, Gus. Where I was working from home before, so I've gotten used to spending a lot of time alone in a very small room. But I do have a window, so that's good. But I think it's I think it's kind of funny to hear other people that are freaking out about that experience and being like, yeah, so you'll get used to it. You'll figure it out. I mean, we're all adaptive. We can all adapt to things as long as we can take the time to make sure that we're at a point where we ask for help if we need it. But but a large percentage of us are going to figure it out on our own, and the rest of us, some of us will need to ask for help and get some help for that. But it doesn't matter where you're at. You can work out of your laundry room. You can work outside, I guess, whatever you want to do. There's some challenges to it, and it's kind of fun. I mean, when you're growing up, you don't remember the easy things. You don't remember the trip down across the country where nothing went wrong. You remember the trip across the country where the tire went flat and the trailer broke and there was no bathrooms, and so and so had to pee in a cup. Like, you remember those things because that's just, and you remember them with fondness almost. So I think this is going to be a time where just but people dying, that's not a good thing. So yes, but just the social isolation challenges of it, we're going to remember all those stupid things that we did. Oh yeah, like my nephew is having a birthday this weekend, and so we're sending him a like COVID survival kit. So we bought he turned 13, so kind of a big teenage years. So we bought a jock strap with a cup to use as a mask for him, just to be silly, just stuff like that. So I love all the things that people are doing to make it fun and interesting, and to be sharing with people and to be caring for people. I mean, you look at all the stuff on the Good News Network by John Krasinski from The Office, and I love just watching that and seeing those things. And a large percentage of people are like so focused on the news, and the news is so excited to tell them everything they want to tell them. Actually, they want to tell them whatever they can to keep on looking at it. So it's kind of a interesting comedy there. But all right, I rambled on long enough.
And you spent some time also getting your whole audio thing set up, because I was kind of helping you out, and just counting the days down. So your packages were delivered. It's like, now I have the microphone, but I don't have the cable. Where's the cable? So that's pretty interesting. How about you, Ulrich? What have you done over the last couple months?
Well, to me, it's kind of surreal because I've been working from home for the last 10 years plus. So life hasn't really changed all that much. I still work in my office. I get out of bed, go to my office in the house, and chug away. And I think the big change there recently have been all the kids at home. I have 3 kids in the house. Can't go to daycare, can't go to school. So that has actually been more of an adjustment trying to get that work. And my daughter just had a birthday here a couple of weeks ago, and Estelle mentioned that. I mean, that's one that's going to be remembered, right? Because we did one of those school drive-bys where everybody from her class like drive-bys and waves and yells "Happy Birthday" from a distance. So that's something that's definitely gonna stand out later. And the occasional helping out with school Zoom meetings, etc., that they do in order to keep it priced on the school. I actually got some text earlier today that I was making too much noise while she was in class, and all the people were able to hear her. Usually that's the other way around. It's me complaining about the kids making too much noise, but in this case, the kids can complain about the adults too. So I guess that book goes both ways.
Yeah, it's been pretty funny with the whole going to school from home situation. Like I can hear like the kids, when I walk by or whatever, like some kid yelling at the teacher, like, "This is boring." It was just hilarious to hear that. I'm like, this will never happen in school. I guess, I don't know, but that was interesting. Anyone else picked up any hobbies or anything during this last couple months? I know that Chris was restoring jet skis. You already mentioned that.
No, sadly, cooking more.
Yeah, right. Cooking. We all became master chefs in the kitchen.
Yeah. I mean, I always like to cook and all that, but it's like, oh, well, I'll try this out again. And then it's like, oh, well, maybe they won't have this tomorrow. Maybe the stores are going to be looted, so you get a little bit more creative and, okay, I got to get something that I can store on the shelves for a while. But the downside of cooking is then you eat more. And it's like, oh, well, I don't want it to go to waste. So that's the downside of it.
I don't want to but you're eating more at home, so you're saving money because you're not out at restaurants.
Well, we're trying to support some local places, whenever we can, it's definitely, and you're right, because it's, the economy is not doing the greatest right now. And so we do when we can, but there's some local pizza places, local, Thai places down the street as opposed to McDonald's. So we try to do that, but you're right. It is kind of nice, breakfast, lunch, and dinner as opposed to like, running down the street during lunchtime. But the downside is it's like eating too much.
So at Business Application Summit, they showed the Chipotle app. Did you guys see that? I didn't know Chipotle was a power app. I'm like, this is awesome. I use it all the time,
Yeah, it's pretty interesting the way that they're doing things over there. But yeah, man, it's been an interesting couple of months. I'll tell you what though, I've noticed, just to get back into Dynamics a little bit, we still are live, obviously, and asking people for questions, but everyone is just making comments like, "Yeah, I'm also fat," stuff like that. So that's always interesting. But the one question, just to bring it back to Dynamics, that I've noticed over the last couple of months is a lot of people, at least some of my customers that I work with, 2 years ago or whatever it is, they were live, they were using Dynamics. Now they are coming and getting a little desperate about this migration to UCI. Like, I know all of us have been warning people, like, guys, this is serious. Like, get into it. Start working on this stuff. And now it seems, at least for me, like starting in April, I don't know if it has to do with COVID or whatnot, but several customers that I haven't heard from in like 2 years, or whatever, a year and a half, now are coming and be like, "Hey, I'm getting this email. Like, we're going to get upgraded. What's up with that?" So now everyone wants to get upgraded. What are you guys seeing out there with your customers?
I found that a lot of people have got more time. So those people that you needed their time to understand what they wanted, or they had to think about things, they were all in meetings and too busy, and they've had all that noise taken away, and they've got a lot more time to think about their computer systems and their dynamic systems. And I'm busier than ever. They're all of a sudden like all over me like flies. Like, I want this and this, and this would be cool. And I'm like, where did all these ideas come from? Because people are looking inside more, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I found the same thing even with portals specifically. That I think a lot of organizations had portals on their wish list, but it never kind of made it to the top. And we're finding now, obviously, portals are maybe more necessary, or people are using and have kind of COVID-related reasons to be using them. But even we're getting lots of requests for things that have nothing to do with with COVID, and I think it's just people have maybe a little bit more, time on their hands or focus on projects that they've always kind of wanted to do, and we're finding that Portals fits that quite well.
And I think that it's the mindset shift of working remotely, right? It's back to, I think we talked about that earlier, of hey, it works, right? It's cool. So now how can I use these tools to enable that even more, right? Well, now that we're remote, I need to track my time differently. Now the remote need to meet differently. I need to collect more different information from people. I need to collaborate differently. I think that might be driving it a little bit. And they're also, this is something I talked about with a potential customer, is, it might save them some money, right? A lot of customers, they'll demand you to be on site. You got to be on site. You got to be on site. I don't care if we're building an enterprise application that allows people to connect around the world. You need to be on site to build it, which I always find ironic. I think they're seeing that it works, and now they have more tools on hand to enable that. So I think that's my feeling on it, at least.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil, for the question, by the way, and also for your $20 donation to the CDC Foundation. Phil skipping his mind in the game and asking a really, really good question. And I wonder what you guys think about this one, because I don't know if I even have an answer myself, but I'm going to try to answer this one as well. He's asking, at what point do you deem a CDS solution too large? Is it when it takes X amount of minutes to install, or like, what are your strategies for segmenting a solution? I think I have an answer, but I want to hear yours. Mine is going to sound like I don't know what I'm doing, but let's see what, you guys that know what you're doing, let's see what you think.
Well, I segment. There's a lot of reasons to segment it, right? First one is maintainability. When you're trying to update a process, for example, you want to update a particular section of code without having to retest everything. So let's say you've got 6 or 7 different types of business processes that are across multiple entity sets or multiple divisions, for example, and they do different things. You may want to update just that particular piece versus having to change all of the different code, or worse, have to retest all the use cases for all of the business processes when you're only changing one area. So I try to make it where that it's modular in an aspect where we can change a specific piece of the product versus not all of the product. So I might want to change our portal in our front end and be able to change that versus having to change stuff that may be 10 years old and works fine, right? I don't want to bring those customizations back over or deal with that. It makes it much easier for us to test and get return on the investment. But I think there's a lot of different strategies to dealing with it. And you got to remember that they're not necessarily dev strategies on how you're handling packages or how you're handling a naming space or that. This is more related to the business as well.
Anyone else wants to answer that one? When is the CDS solution too big?
No, I agree. I think that's you think about it from a functional standpoint. When I talked earlier about the ALM process and automating it all, that was some of the reasons we ran into problems. Is we had this monolithic solution that had everything not very big. We were still work in progress, and that was some of the stuff that it would have been nice to say, I'm working on this, you're working on that, and we're going to deploy those solutions piecemeal. The hard part is deciding what that's going to be, and that's going to be dependent upon your business case. You mentioned portals. Portals is another one that will drive that, where I've forget who mentioned it, but hey, we're going to have a solution because they want to use the configuration migration tool, which requires a solution. Put your portal related entities in there. Say your forms, they're going to be web forms, entity forms, etc. And that's one reason that I heard that actually I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Then you're not going to be stepping on each other's toes whenever you're deploying. Is somebody working on, let's say, the CRM side of things versus the portal side of things. Just one example of how to segment it.
So I think there are limitations, Gus, like with performance, when you're trying to upload and let it run forever and you don't know what it's doing because it just sits there importing. Some of that is challenging as well, especially when you're trying to deploy to thousands of customers. So again, breaking out those solutions, being able to have like checkpoints to know, okay, the first solution installed, I'm 10%. The next solution installed, I'm 20%. You can actually see what's going on versus just, okay, we're going to wait all night and see if it's okay in the morning, or we're going to roll back, right? So I think those are some of the advantages of breaking apart the solution. And you start to see that, as to my colleague's point here, as the more complex you get into the business scenarios and the more code and content you have, the better it is to break it into those modules.
How about you, Dara?
So I'm more or less speaking from an area of stupidity in here, and that I haven't been on projects that are ginormous to the point that we are concerned about the solution size. Primarily, it's more in Jim's side of the fence there, where I'm more concerned about when we are deploying things, because we're doing a lot more piecemeal stuff. I usually haven't had any experience being in one project where we're spending a year and a half developing, and then we push one giant thing. It's every other week we're pushing something, so that's just limited by how big that solution is. So that's just something to think about and to worry about.
I guess I'm the only one who kind of realizes that a solution is too big when it fails upon import. So that's when I know I have to segment it. I
said I was speaking from stupidity.
You know, I'm gonna be honest. Like I try to put it all in one solution. I trust Microsoft and the fact that they are, you know, beefing up their servers or hitting the turbo button. I don't know how that works. I'm not an expert in data centers, but I assume that all my solution imports will work. And when it fails, that's when I segment. So that's kind of, I don't know how big that is, Phil.
Well, you know what,
you
bring up a good point. It could be, you know, and I think, Daryl, you mentioned it a moment ago about what's the point of the solution? Is it a incremental deployment to your dev environment staging, from your dev environment to your staging for testing? Or is it a final production deployment where you might have that one monolithic solution that still works, right? And if it fails, you have to break it apart. Because I've seen, you know, you have 10 different solutions for the dev process, but you got to make sure you put them into the master solution that has everything. Like, I need to rebuild this from scratch, my sort of fail-safe solution, right? And that's going to be what goes into source code control for, you know, brand new solution, new environment coming on board. I've actually seen people like say, I want all my plugins in one solution, workflows in another, and then all my entities in a third, and I'm going to deploy those in order. But then you get chicken before the egg because of dependencies. So that's not always clear-clad either. So I think it might depend on the point of deployment. Is it your final, I'm going to production, or my initial production deployment versus an incremental, I'm working and deploying to all my other environments?
Yeah, and then so far we've talked about just kind of the deployment process, but there's also the solutions that you're using and you're editing them. Sometimes it's a lot nicer to work with smaller solutions so that you're not having to look through giant lists of entities to get things. Like, you know, back in the day when we had to go into the default solution, trying to get down to an entity that's name was closer to the end of the alphabet, that's not very much fun. So whether it deploys or not, I think Gus, if you're reaching the limit of if it fails when it's import, I think you're well past the point where your solution is too big.
Yeah, I agree.
So sometimes just having that kind of smaller subset of things to have to be searched through is nice.
I will tell you that my mindset changed going from being a solution consultant and architect on one side and then going to build products on the other side, right? It's a totally different perspective on what you're doing and how it's easier to maintain and work with, especially when you're deploying to 1,000 schools, right? How do you deal with that versus I'm making my one customization, or I'm just moving something from sandbox to prod? You know, it's all about the environment, the business process, the challenges you're dealing with. There's not a right answer without knowing what your specific environment is.
Absolutely. All right. Any more questions, please bring them up on the chat window. I'm happy to ask our experts that are still with us. We have, you know, a little bit under an hour to go. So final questions, please go ahead and bring them in. I do want to go back to something I brought up earlier, which is people making that transition into the unified interface. And maybe people watching this, or perhaps, you know, they haven't even paid attention to the fact that it's, as of now, going away in October. So for those companies that haven't even looked into this, they have been ignoring the emails, they are still in the classic interface, and they should probably start moving forward, you know, making the transition. What can you guys talk about? What are the first few kind of steps for organizations that haven't done anything and are going to be moving into the unified interface, you know, within a few months?
I think the first thing that when we started going through this process, the big decision was, do you move into one of the kind of out-of-the-box sales hubs or a customer service hub, or do you create your own model-driven app? So I think that was when we first do it. That was the biggest question in our mind was, do you customize the Microsoft ones, or do you create your own model-driven app from scratch? And I think the way we're seeing it go now is there's so many kind of special. They're putting a lot of settings screens in those model-driven apps, so we kind of lean towards taking those apps and customizing those as opposed to starting from scratch. That being said, we've worked on a lot of projects that would be kind of considered more traditional XRM projects that really have nothing to do with sales or customer service. So we will create from scratch model-driven apps, but I think that was the first kind of mental hurdle that we had to get over was which way do we go with that.
I think for me, it's been really nice to get ahead and do it, make the change sooner, but it's been really nice to hand over to users and say, there's this new way of using it. I want you to try and use it for a couple of weeks, but if you're really stuck and you can't get in touch with someone to find the blooming button you're looking for, you can switch back to your old way. And I think it gives them that more of a nicer path into it, that they can, if things go really wrong, they can go back to their comfort blanket. And I think it really helps to give users time to adjust. Because I remember when I first picked it up, I was like, what on earth is this? So I think giving the time to adjust is really important.
What it is, it's CRM 2011.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we came from 2013 on-prem to get them online. And that was a big enough change. And then now it's
how they respond? Like how did you get a mixed reviews, or did everybody like it or hate it? Or?
Very positive. At first they were like, oh, another interface. Oh, and then they were like, oh, this is great. Like, I know you said it was good, but I get it. Like, oh. I was like, I know, right? I'm just like being that little giddy person in the corner, like, it's great, it's great. But actually, really good feedback in general. Once they work out where their little missing buttons are, it's great.
All right. Any other questions? Again, for our experts at this point, all of us MVP on the call. One thing that I really missed this year was the MVP Summit for sure. And I know that some of you have never been to the summit because you're new MVP and all of that. I think that the virtual MVP was cool, right? Because we still get to see what the team has been working on and have the opportunity to provide feedback. But being in person is definitely going to be welcomed, right? When we get back to the MVP Summit. But have you guys applied to the CRMUG Summit in October? And I mean, hopefully at this point it's still happening. I don't know if we're still going to have measures in effect for distancing and stuff like that. I think it will be odd, if you have to be 6 foot. Like, are we gonna have 10 people in each session? Like, I don't know how this is gonna work. But did you guys apply for that? I know that the deadline was last week, I believe, for the sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah. For Gus, some of us having 10 people in our sessions wouldn't be abnormal. So. But I don't know. I'm still. I haven't. Apparently, I'm still going to Barcelona at the end of June because I haven't been told that that's canceled yet. So, will I see any of you guys there?
I know. I'm supposed to go as well, and I haven't received any notification about it. So we'll see, man. I was looking forward to that, and I know that you were gonna be there too as well in March, and I think the week of the event, that's the week that the U.S. stopped all travel from Europe. So if they actually ran the event, I think we would have still been in Barcelona by now.
You and I would still be on a beach somewhere.
I think so, yeah. So how about you, Chris and Jim and Daryl? Do you guys submit some sessions? Are you planning to be there in October?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the board with you, so we're going through sessions now and dealing with that. So, I still think that's the event of the year. For users, as far as Dynamics Communities Summit's concerned. So I'd be very saddened if they don't have it this year. I do not think that will be successful in a virtual event like some of these other one-day events. I think there's a lot of networking and a lot of conversation that goes on there that happens. Again, if we have to, we will. But I think that's one of the ones that I'm hoping will be back to normal by then.
Yeah, I applied as well. It's my last year was my first year, and it was a lot of fun. It was learned a ton, met a lot of people that I'd talked to over the years, and it was a really good experience. And if I'm not sure, I mean, it's coming up in October, so we get a little bit of ways off, kind of waiting to see how things will go, whether we'll go or not. I want to see, what the state of affairs is with the world before I make a decision. I just assumed it would be virtual, but you're right. They're still scheduled to be live. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Best thing about it for me is I don't have to fly. I could drive. So close enough.
Nice.
So
yeah.
So that helps me out a little bit. So yes, I'm planning to go. I submitted a whole bunch of sessions. I wasn't too excited about the whole session submittal process. I think I had to pick in order to submit a session, I think you had to click submit 8 times or 9 times.
I know, it was interesting.
It was kind of.
I agree to the whatever the rules every time you submitted a session. It's like, why don't you just do this globally? I agree.
Yep. Amy, you're changing locations again.
I know. What is going on? We get to see her whole house.
He drove to the office now. See?
Like all the rooms to mix it up. No, I forgot my laptop charger, and then my housemate's left for work, so now I can come back to the other place.
And by the end of the session, she'll be kayaking, with the laptop. So how far is it for you, Daryl, to drive to Nashville?
It's just under 3 hours.
Oh wow! So it's about 4.
4. Oh no, 4.5. Another 4.5. So it's yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So that makes it easier too. So we don't have to cancel anything. I assume I have at this point. I had so much travel coming, and I cancel everything, and they didn't give me any money back. So I assume I have at least $100,000 worth of Delta credit right now because I've canceled so much stuff, and I have to fly by 2021. So I don't know what's gonna happen.
A year of first class travel?
Yeah, I guess so. The funny thing is, I had one. I was going to Egypt to dive, and I was flying Air France all the way to Egypt. So I had to ask for the money back, and they were like, okay, you get your money back, but if you don't use it by the end of 2020, you get a credit, but if you don't use it, we'll give you the money back. And I'm like, why don't you just give me the money back, and then I'll decide if I want to use it or not. It was the first one that does that, but Delta didn't do that, and I don't know if Nick, you did with the hotel in Spain, but mine is if I don't go, I lose it kind of thing. They didn't give me anything back.
No, I didn't. I got lucky there. I booked through right through the hotel, and I was able to cancel it. So with Barcelona, Delta gave me my money back for my flight and my hotel. And same thing with going to MVP Summit. I got. I hadn't actually booked any hotels for that one yet. So other than through the for the extra days, I hadn't booked anything yet. So Air Canada gave me credit on my flight back. So I got lucky.
That's true. I had extra days too, and I didn't cancel anything. So I wonder if I was charged for that. Great. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm
gonna try to bring us back to another dynamics question.
Oh, that's right. This is a dynamics session.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You did mention about the new UI being forced on, or the old UI going away. How about that?
That's right.
And I'm just now beginning to see people that are kind of freaking out about the timeline of it. And when I'm in the back of my head, I'm like, you should have been freaking out about this back last November. And so just now I'm getting contacted in a few projects. Hey, we need someone to do this. I'm like, okay, I hope. Yeah, I've got a client who has the most customized UI that I've ever seen, or I've ever done at least. And it's it's built within the actual client SDK, but it's not. It's all custom and all these custom scripting engine, all this kind of stuff that's built into it. And I'm like you guys have thousands of people across the country that rely on this thing to work, and if it doesn't work, you're going to be really, really sad. And it took a year and a half to build this thing, and now you've got 4 months and you're just starting to do this upgrade process. And so I'm just
yeah.
Does anyone know of an example of someone who went live with because when you make the transition, they take your old thing and convert it into one of those UCI apps for you, right? And you get that message at the top that says, hey, we kind of did this automatically. Does anyone know of a situation where someone just went live with that and they were like, yeah, this is fine for us?
No, I don't.
No.
I do know a client that did do that, and
It
they had
wasn't
just a
fine
few
with them.
minor bugs, but they had hardly any customizations at all. So
Yeah, that is great. I did have a customer who came back, and they got Dynamics CRM 2011 back when it was like brand new. I started working with them, I think, in 2016 or something like that. So they had been literally customizing this thing to oblivion for 5 straight years. And then once I came in, I'm like, okay, guys, we have to stop. So they came to me and they were like, hey, we have this UCI thing coming. And again, all their customizations are like CRM 2011. And they're like, do you think, can we do like a 20-hour thing, like a contract for 20 hours so you can help us upgrade? And I'm like, well, we can, but that's going to be just, the for me to take a look at a few entities in 20 hours. I mean, it's going to take a lot longer than, people think, I think, for some companies. Even small companies that have added a bunch of customizations into their system, unsupported in a lot of cases, even for those companies, it's going to take a lot longer than they think.
It's a great time for them to build some new power apps there to change the UI and do persona specific points just for their users as well. So that you can turn it negative into a positive.
Yeah, and it's funny too. Like one that happened to me was the customer came back and they were like, "Oh, maybe we should look into using business rules to, overwrite or replace some of these JavaScript." And I'm like, we should have done this back in 2015. Like this is, you guys have just kept this code because it continues to work. Microsoft has done a good job allowing a lot of this stuff to just work. And now that we're moving to the unified interface, that's no longer the case. So,
yeah, for us it's dialogues. Dialogues are usually the pain for kind of customers with kind of few customizations where it kind of moves over pretty nicely. It's when they're using dialogues heavily that it's a pain.
So I have another question that I've actually heard people talk about. Anybody have any experience with a real case of with the when the Power Platform first came out, I was kind of skeptical and I'm like, oh, okay, this is the new Access, the new Excel, right? Because I just didn't understand it very well. And now with like V9 and the whole making CDS a real thing, and now it's something I actually understand a little bit better. Talking to people, and it was actually at Summit is why it made me think of it. Somebody said, well, why am I going to pay for, and I think it was mentioned earlier, why am I going to pay for these licenses for sales and customer relationship and CRM? Why don't I just go build stuff myself and, roll out of the Dynamics license and buy a new, migrate to Power Platform away from a Dynamics 365 solution? Started in 2011, 2013, 2015 or whatever. Anybody talk to anybody that's doing that? Because I'm like, that's a really interesting idea. I'll save a lot of money, but what's the cost in the migration, right? So anybody run into that?
So Steve Mordew talks a lot about this topic in regards to building your own platform on top of the Dynamics, right? And it was what I was talking about earlier on making that choice on which is the best way, right? Do I need the first party app? Do I don't? Am I integrating with anything or not? A lot of decisions and consideration that has to be undertook there because basically you're setting the foundation up. But as far as change, taking all your data and migrating it off to a new design and dealing with that and alone can be a big challenge, right? Mm-hmm. To work on the license. And really the Power Apps license, I think the full-fledged one is what, $40 a month, and you can basically build all the entities and do whatever you want for unlimited amount with that license. So I mean, is it a savings? Yeah.
Yeah, but even for the $40 a month, I think it's too much for most people. Like I think that $10 a month is enough because with the $10 you get access to one model-driven application, one Canvas app, one portal. So you get access to all that stuff. And realistically, for most users, how many users need to access multiple apps when you're custom tailored designing these apps? Like you're designing it for a specific user role. For some other specific user role, you create a different app. Those guys also pay $10 a month. So
let me tell you a little story. Let me tell you a little story. Here's my story. My story is never bet against Microsoft licensing, because when you do that and you build applications to that model changes swift and fast, and in the new world in the cloud much more often than what we had in the past. And when they make changes, you got to remember now that online, we're able to see everything that's happening in the interface. They know how many entities are being used. They know what the productivity is of every user. They know how much data requests are coming from the API. They know everything that's happening in that system. And they are going to tweak that model to take the advantage of people using that system for whatever reason. But they're going to make it so it's tune it for the most profit, so to speak. I call it the old IBM days, where, mainframe processor, you paid for CPU running time, you paid for disk space, and you paid for compute, right? Those were the big things that were out there. But my point is that if you build your solution to avoid a specific license type or not, eventually that's going to come back around and it's going to be something that you don't like or no longer works for you, and you're going to be having that conversation again. So I wouldn't use that in the conversation. I mean, it's okay if you're, a 10, 15 person user shop and you're just trying to get off the ground, starting up and moving like that. But am I going to do 1,000 user organization on Power Apps because I want to save a couple dollars? I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to bet on that.
It's not a couple dollars, though. It's not a couple dollars.
No, it's a lot of money. It is.
Just to answer Jim's question, like, I'm working with a customer right now going exactly through that. Now, they did it kind of interesting because they wanted to go from on-prem to online, right? And in the process of growing from on-prem to online, they're switching from primary apps on-prem to custom app online, right? And the reason for that is they said, look, if we're already paying all this money to be on-premise, why don't we just go online and pay $10 per user per month? And they're using a custom application to do that. And the reason for that is they had implemented with a different partner in the past, but when I looked at their solution, it was like 90% custom. Like, most of it was custom already. So I'm like, look, when you go online, we just convert these little pieces that are, out of the box, Microsoft proprietary. We convert that to custom, and then you'll be fully online, paying $10 per user per month. So I've seen it with companies out there, converting. I think that in this case, doing the math for them, within like a year and a half, they were able to get all their money back and then continue to pay, whatever money they're paying for the transition to go online. And for the money, after that, they would hopefully, again, and I hear you, Chris, this changes all the time. As of now, they would be able to continue those savings, right, going after that. So we're hoping for that.
Yeah, but your customer, what's key about your customers, they didn't use the out-of-the-box stuff. 90%, 95% customized, right? Which I think is a big thing. But I see some other people who are giving advice on people who are using the out-of-the-box entities and saying, hey, let's rebuild account because we can. Let's rebuild opportunity because we can.
Yeah, but
let's rebuild lead because we can.
Remember, though, that the $10 license gives you account and contact and activities. It gives you some entities, not all the other ones, but...
And my question, I should have clarified more. I was thinking around the sort of the XRM style things, right? I'm building a line of business application using the Power Platform. 5 years ago, I bought Dynamics 365 CRM, and I got rid of all the sales crap, right? And I don't know how many conversations I had with customers where they're like, well, I don't want to do sales. I'm like, you're not doing sales. You're doing relationship XRM. You had to do that whole spiel. Yeah. And they got it finally, but that's more what I'm talking about. So it sounds like you're running into exactly what I'm thinking about. Because worked on a product where, do a lot of stuff in the government space is perfect for that, right? I don't necessarily need to do customer relationship management. I want to build line of business applications, right? And that's where the Power Platform, and again, what I was saying earlier about the accelerators, those are awesome because they demonstrate exactly what I was talking about. And I was just kind of curious as to how many XRM style solutions I should have clarified. We're moving to like, why am I paying all this? And I'm like, geez, I'm going to, next time I re-up, I'm just going to re-architect it, move over the entities I care about, and not be an upgrade or a migration, but a redesign, a re-architecture, right?
Yeah. And that is what that's the conversation.
Microsoft doesn't like when people talk about, downgrading their license to Power Apps, but it's a reality. I mean, it's if I'm not using, you're supposed to be paying for the IP, which there's millions and millions and millions of dollars in research and development for a lot of these functionality, right, that Microsoft created. Like, all right, you go and try to create the whole customer service engine with knowledge-based article capabilities and, entitlements and SLAs and all that. Like, it would take a lot of money and time to be able to create that. So I think it's totally worth paying for it so you don't make it. But if out of that only you're using 5%, then why am I going to be forced to pay for the other 95 that I'm not using, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and more of the situations that that are coming to mind for me as I was having a conversation earlier today of like why choose the Power Platform. What the situations I'm talking about is I've got an enterprise, right? Again, government agencies going out and saying you're going to use a COTS product before you write custom dev because I don't want to have 40 years of custom code to maintain, in-house. So we want to use an enterprise solution. Power Platform, Salesforce, Pega is another one that comes up a lot. There's a lot of competition for Power Platform, and the benefit. I mean, totally with you guys. I mean, don't rebuild it because they're vested in it. They're going to upgrade it. They're going to own it. They're going to maintain it, and you're going to get all the benefits of it. But if you say, look, we're going to move away from these custom apps and say we're going to use this as our enterprise development platform, it opens up a world of licensing options for them too. So I think there'll be, Microsoft to be open to like, oh, that's a foot in the door for enterprise application X. We've got 7 more lined up because we had to keep up with the enterprise architecture within our agency, and government's just one of them.
That's the other target market, right, Jim? That's
right.
The other market of where we're CRM people. We didn't come from, we've seen the platform grow up from that aspect, but there's a whole new slew of people who are coming up that know nothing about Dynamics, what an accountant on. They don't have any of that. They don't know about the sales module. They know Power Apps, and they're building and doing all of it. And that is growing. I think the quote was, I forgot, 3 or 4 times the rate of the CRM space that is growing for those apps and custom things. And I actually do a class for the local user groups called CRM as your development platform, right? And I just say, look, you need something that does forms, you need something that does security, you want mobile capabilities, you want a portal, and you want it all within a solution package. Here you go. It's already built for you. Why are you building all this code built inside of this, right? And then when they start to look at it and see it, you can see the light bulbs go off. So I totally agree where you're headed.
Well, we saw that a lot at Ignite. I talked to a lot of people at Ignite. Like, I was surprised at some organizations that came. It was focused on government just because it was in DC, but there were a couple of organizations that spoke to me when we were there, and I'm like, wow, you guys are entertaining this? Really? That's kind of cool. So I think there's a lot of potential there. Again, back to Gus, your point about the licensing costs, there's a risk there. But you have a world of opportunity with other solutions. And I have to say, I just saw Steve Mordew posted the last nail in the on-premise coffin as a post. So
of course.
Just popped up. Yeah.
I thought he said it was already dead.
Speaking of on-premise, we did get a question, and it includes on-premise, and I think this is a question that I think Chris answered earlier, but let's deal with it again. It says, what is the best way to upgrade from CRM 2011 to 365? And in addition to that, do you guys have a best solution for showing pictures in a grid within Dynamics 365 on-prem?
I can answer the first part if you want.
Let's do it.
All right, so the first part, depending on how many users you have in your organization, you might be eligible for what's called the Microsoft Fast Track process. The Microsoft Fast Track process allows you to take your 2015, actually 2011 and up database and move it into Dynamics 365 without any code for data conversion. It's basically the lift and shift model that we wanted for years. It moves the SQL database along with all the details, the dates, the timestamps, everything as is into a online sandbox. Once you get it there, then you'll have work to do with regards to the solutions that you have, making sure the customizations are up to date for the current version. So any JavaScript or front-end forms, UCI, all the good stuff, you have to work through all that. But for the most part, it's the fastest way to get to the cloud without having to do the old school way, which was we used to use a tool called Kingsway Soft, and we used to do data migrations and moved all the customizations. And that is significantly more dollars to make that happen. So if you check out a partner that does Fast Track, there's a lot of them out there that do that. But for the most part, that's what I would recommend to move online. The other option when you move online is to consider starting over. And I say that and people think you're crazy. And I'm like, you really need to think about everything that's here. These conversations we've been having in this last hour alone on, I've got these different, I don't need the account entities and those things. I'm fine with a Power Apps license. You need to consider that in all of your approach on moving online. And then maybe you just move your data into the right new design for you. But so that answers I think the best way to move to D365 online today.
Yeah, for sure. Does anybody have an answer for what's the best solution to show pictures in a grid for on-prem?
I'm searching the PCF gallery right now.
Yeah, I was going to point someone to the PCF. I'm also in the meantime going to
Yeah.
Does that stuff work on-prem though? Especially if you have CRM
Oh,
2011?
No, sorry. Good question. Custom web resource, I guess.
Yep, custom web resources. Probably Telerik controls already out there to do that.
Yeah.
Or some other grid. There's 5,000 of them.
Yeah,
Amy,
you're going to
you're
need. I
breaking
think
up
you're
a
going to
little
need another group.
Yeah, Amy, your sound is breaking up a little bit.
Sorry, I was going to say upgrade to online, then use a PCF.
There you go.
Yeah. That is the
Okay, what
right
now?
answer.
Wait, how long has Amy been an MVP? It sounds like
Man,
it's
she
like 5 or
sounds
6
like a
years. with that
veteran.
answer.
I love it. Awesome.
Whole 2 months now. 2
Yeah.
months.
All right.
That's
Fooled
awesome.
me.
All right. Let's see. We have 30 minutes to go, a little bit less than 30 minutes. So thank you guys for sticking with us for 2.5 hours. See if there are any more questions, or if any of you thought of any questions along the way for the rest of us. I'm happy to pass the host to you. What do you guys think?
It's all you.
Daryl is thinking. Let me think. I know I had a question about.
I got one.
All right.
All right. So how are you guys keeping up to speed with what's going on in your career with all the different changes and what's happening here? I'm not just talking about the one item. I'm talking about all the things. And I'm not even talking about the time you spend in being an MVP and learn all the other stuff. I'm talking about just for your career and your job you do every day. Any advice on what you can do to help ease the load, so to speak?
Panic. No, honestly, I've been recommending to people, just talk to some people about, learning, getting up to speed. I have to say that the learning material on docs.microsoft.com as part of the certification exams is really good. I got to say that there's some that's lacking for some of the exams, like the developer exam, had a few missing bits to it. The solution architect exam, that was brutal, I thought. But the material on that, I think so far has been really, really good. So keeping up with and I'm going to go look at some stuff myself, like there's the Azure fundamental certification. First thing I'm going to do is just go look at the training material as part of the exam. I'm really impressed with what they've done over the last, year, maybe 2 years. They've been consolidating all that stuff. I have to say that's some really good stuff.
Do you mean in terms of staying up to date with dynamic stuff or other stuff? I mean, Power Platform stuff. I don't know. I don't think I understand the question.
I mean, basically, you're no longer a one-trick pony, right? You have many different skill sets. It's not just Power Apps. It's Power Automate. It's Power BI. It's Dynamics licensing. It's team member licensing. It's first-party app, third-party app. It's UCI versus regular. It's just every angle it's coming at you, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are under this mysterious mysterious curse or something that thinks because we have an MVP badge that you know every answer. I know you're relatively new and haven't had much time to go to a conference, but when you sit at a conference and me and the older MVPs call it stump the MVP, right? Someone wants to come in that room and bring a question to you that it's just, it's so far out there that you probably never would have touched it, or it's just something you didn't think about, right? So how do you continue? Learning is obviously one aspect of it, but how do you choose what to balance, right? What do you balance it based on, if you picked an area that you specialized in that you like, is it truly building apps in Power Apps? Is that your focal point? And then everything else is just whenever I get to it, or I try to do it when I can. And Nick, the same for you. How do you not get stale are you a one-trick pony only doing portals, or do you go off and do the other ones? I think the devs have it easier than us because they're off and they're somewhat within the SDK. and being able to cover and do that stuff. But these other items where they require the functional experience, like, if you're your solution architect and you're sitting down in front of a client and they're saying, I need to do X, Y, Z, do you think about adding then field service to cover some of that for scheduling? Or for PSA, do you add project in there? Are you still building it? You know what I mean? Where does that mindset come from? How do you adopt to it? Or how do you keep your skill set up to speed is really the question.
Yeah, and it's tough, especially with portals. You can very well be a kind of a one-trick pony. I like to consider myself a kind of a jack of all trades but master of one. So we do obviously a lot of stuff in portals, but we pick up Power Automate when we need to. We're doing quite a bit of Power BI work, and I find that it's funny sometimes you'll have no experience in something and you kind of find one project where you can kind of pick it up, and then more opportunities come to learn. It is tough because there's so much you really can't know it all. So we tend to say, okay, we're good at projects that have a major portal component, and I have these same conversations with my clients where they want us to bring in technologies that maybe we don't know absolutely everything about, but there's kind of this balance between, well, we know their business, we may not know the technology, so you kind of have to balance what's more valuable here. Is it knowing the technology or knowing the business? So it's the same thing. We're doing projects that involve portals. If we have to do a Power BI report, well, maybe we're not Ulrich in terms of Power BI, but do we, the fact that we know everything about the data model, maybe we are best to maybe have a little bit of learning curve on the Power BI side so that we can, we probably can do it faster than trying to teach someone that. And just by doing little projects like that, just kind of expanding in small areas like that, I find that we're able to kind of learn all those different areas enough so that we can become those kind of jack of all trades. And then when an opportunity comes up where it's like, hey, we need someone to do Power BI for a year, well, then you reach out and you find the experts who can do that. But yeah, jack of all trades, master of one. That's my motto.
I think
Nice.
I think one thing to do is share stuff, right? It's part of being an MVP, and it's how a lot of us have gotten to be an MVP. Is if I want to learn something, I have to build it. I can't just go read it and know it. I mean, I've never been able to do that, unfortunately. And the stuff like, I mean, Nick's a perfect example. He does the monthly call on Power Portals, new topic each month. It's excellent, and I try to participate on that as much as I can because I feel like I learn something, but it also challenges me to learn because I want to share, right? So I think that kind of stuff really keeps your skills up to date. The other side of it too is I don't try to keep up on everything. I just can't. I used to be that way when I was in development. I felt when I first started writing code, I had to know every single language in the world, which back in the day wasn't quite as many as now. And it was just it was a fool's errand. It was crazy to even try. So I try to have a broad understanding, and I think the background that we've had, knowing the platform as long as we have, gives us an edge in the Power Platform world. I'm very confident in CDS. I'm very confident in model-driven apps, Power Apps, Canvas apps. I feel like I know enough to be dangerous, and I'm learning. So I'll defer to people like Daryl. He has a similar background that I have, and he's sharing tons of stuff, whether it's tools or knowledge on what goes on with the Canvas app from a developer's perspective. So I think I've hit that point in my career, and for my sanity, I just don't try anymore, and I defer to the experts when I need to. So when I go in as a solution architect, technical architect, whatever you want to call it, I'm like, okay, well, let me go ask Bob. Let me go ask Daryl. Let me ask Nicholas. Let me go ask Amy on, and Eric popped back on, I believe, and he's my AI guy, so I don't try to anymore. And I think it's saved me a lot of time. And it also allows me to bring other people into the fold and rely on their expertise.
Yeah, Chris, it's funny that you mentioned that you go to conferences and everyone thinks, oh, you got your MVP, you know all the answers. I had that experience a couple of weeks ago where I got brought in working with a partner, and they bring me in and they say, okay, they didn't really tell me what the meeting was about, and they say, okay, here we've written a Canvas app and we want your input on this Canvas app. I said, I have never written a Canvas app in my life. So it was a very short call because Canvas apps are just not what we do.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny that you mentioned the whole Canvas app thing because, when people think about Power Apps, they think of Canvas apps most of the time. Like, if you think about Power Apps, it's like Canvas apps. And to the point that other people would consider themselves to be experts in Power Apps, and the utmost worldwide
Like national
resource
experts?
Yeah, like worldwide experts in Power Apps without knowing anything about model-driven applications that are out there. So how do you guys explain to a prospect or someone who is not familiar with Power Apps whatsoever? How do you explain what Power Apps are? Again, to someone who's non-technical. I want you guys to attempt this because it's interesting to see people, kind of try to explain what Power Apps are to someone who is not familiar with the Power Platform.
Are you sure you're saying Power Apps, or are you sure you don't just mean Canvas apps? Because I feel like you're
Power Apps.
I feel like
Power Apps.
I feel like no one wants to know what Power Apps are. I feel like everyone wants to know what Canvas apps are.
Okay.
It's a shiny new toy, the tool set.
Well, but I think that's the point. I think the point is it's the Power Platform. It's the first thing I say, right? And I always go into a little bit of a history based on what I understand. I could be totally wrong about it too, right? But I heard bits and pieces over the years, and Power Apps are Canvas apps. They are model-driven apps. It's all part of the same platform. It's all part of the
portals.
Same portal. Power Apps portals. We're the space
agents.
now, right? Absolutely. And they all work together. They're all evolving together, and that's kind of I give examples of it too, right? Portals is a perfect example of the challenge of, wait, this is another website? No, it is, but all the data is coming from CDS, right? It's dependent upon CDS. Just had that conversation yesterday. So you basically just tell a little story and give some examples of it. And I think it kind of gels for people. And you just say, yes, they're all Power Apps, CDS, Power Portal, Canvas apps, CDS, Power Portals, the whole 9 yards. I mean, even you want to consider a flow. Is a flow a Power App?
No, it's a flow.
Chris, you're on mute.
Yeah, Chris is on mute. Showing all his phone.
Sorry. So this is how I explain it, right? For the non-technical users, I pick up a phone and I show them all their buttons on their phone and all their apps. And I say, you see all these things on here? What are they? Oh, well, one's for my map, one's for my music, one's for my stereo, one's for this. I said, right. Think of that as all different business processes or departments or whatever that you'd like to have access with certain personas for each one of those people. That's what you're able to do with a Power App. And then I take that and say, the other reason why this is different from the past is, and again, some people will talk about like technical and, Lotus Notes and the fact that you had multiple databases and all that, is the fact that all the apps know the data. So when you entered in your credit card into one information, they all can see them across. You don't have to enter it 5 times. When you entered in your email address and your password, it worked across all of them. Your IT department is able to control and manipulate all of them. So when you start to tell the story of the power of what's there, people start to register that. And this is something I did about 3 years ago. I was talking to Chuck Ingram of CongruentX, and he was telling me about, where did I see we were headed? And now every word was app, 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 app. That's all you heard was app, app, app. We're doing this and the mobile app and this app. And really, we've gone down to what now is called the micro app, right? We're at an app. It has a specific purpose. It may be a warehouse check-in. It may be a scanner at a kiosk booth. It could be anything these days. But
the phrase for that is tailored experience. I think works really well. I stole that from a friend of mine.
Yeah, and Microsoft used to call it personas. Remember, they had the personas of here's Sally or here's Amy, and they do X, and here's Gus, and that's what they did. Well, it's the same thing. We just went down another level to the actual app experience and said, now this is specific for you. You can do your job. Who cares what's on the form with 500 fields the back office sees, right? Your form is nice and fast, quick, gets you what you need. You can fill out, get things done, shortcut. That's the power of the Power Apps and what you can do with it. But if you try to go the other direction and explain the platform and the technology side and all of that, you get people in the room just glazed over like, what?
Cat
and
Francis. That's what I was thinking. When you're talking about personas, Cat Francis came to mind. I was just, the way I've been explaining it is kind of like simple at the beginning, but I always get like stuck. The way I explain it is I always like to explain what CDS is, which is all of your company's information, like all of what your company knows, customers, prospects, the products it sells, the phone calls you made. Like think about all the information your company has. And then Power Apps and the other components of the Power Platform are essentially ways to interact with that information, right? So Canvas apps and model-driven apps are just the user interface we use to interact with that data, to write into it, read it, delete it, whatever we want to do with the data. We use those applications as our UI. Power Automate, makes the data move around based on different things and create information or share information or whatever. Same thing with Power BI. It grabs all that data and surfaces in a way that makes sense to you. But then I get stuck beyond that level when people start asking about, for example, well, what are the differences between model-driven and Canvas apps? And try to explain it at that same level of simplicity. It's a struggle, at least for me. So I was wondering if you had any better way to do it, because I struggle.
A Canvas app is a pretty face into a spreadsheet or a database, and a model-driven app is like a snazzy online version of spreadsheet.
All right. That's interesting. Earlier,
I think,
earlier I had a question. I just want to bring this up because we only have 14 minutes to go, and I want to get your thoughts on this. There's still 12 people on the stream, so thank you so much to all of those of you who are logged in. And I want to dedicate some time also to the MVP side and the people who are out there contributing and sharing. One of the questions that came up early, and this was a question for Charles and Ryan and whatnot, and I didn't have the opportunity to ask, was, is there anyone out there that maybe during this pandemic is taking advantage of the fact that they're at home, that maybe the 3 hours they spend every day driving to the office and back, they're now using that to share, their best practices and the things they've learned essentially with the community. Is there anyone out there that is inspiring you, that is putting out amazing content that you are essentially following and perhaps even using to stay on top of, all the changes that are coming up? So I'm posting this to you guys. Is there anyone out there that is inspiring you that perhaps is not an MVP, or maybe it is an MVP that you want to give a shout out?
I'd like to shout out to Leon Tribe and what's the other guy's name? He's going to kill me. Jeff Lotz, of both MVPs or fellow MVPs that have been using Power BI to do these unbelievable graphs on the coronavirus, COVID-19. They've been importing data from Johns Hopkins and all the different sources from all over the world and building out all kinds of trends using prediction. We can possibly post out a link later, Gus, with the links to call it. But I was sitting home thinking, how do you reach the community in a time like this, what you can do? And I think that they led by example and really put something out there. And they're still updating it every day. It's on Facebook every day, of both the US, the Canadian, and then all the other countries, their growths, what's their prediction for the number of cases, if it's recovery mode. And again, it's based on the data they're recording. They're not making it up, but they're using things like the prediction analysis to say they think it's going to peak at this particular time. And it's been pretty close. I mean, and if any of you guys ever worked with a data set like that, bringing it in and out and trying to do compares and that, it's a lot of work. That's not something they're doing in 5 minutes and sucking it in. So hats off to those guys.
Yeah, he's done it daily too. Yeah. And you're right. I totally agree. I've been watching it. It's not just posting the graphs either. It's not just, hey, here's some cool Power BI stuff. He's putting a lot of thought into the analysis and telling you what the numbers mean, and I think that's important because I look at those charts and I either freak out or I have no clue what they mean. So it's nice to have the discussion about it. I'd have to say one that I've been following is Emma Darcy, who works for Click Dimensions. She's been doing a lot of sessions lately, and she did one recently that stood out to me, the Scottish Summit, and then she's done it online as well, about imposter syndrome. So I always follow a lot of technical stuff, but the stuff she did was pretty special because it was something I struggle with still to this day. And her talking about something she's obviously coming from a technical background with Click Dimensions and all that, and she's taken the time to talk about personal experiences and challenges we face in our professional careers that is not technical. I have to give her a good shout out for that one.
Anyone else?
I think my lifeline's been a podcast, because for me, I'm sat at home all day looking at a screen. I want to get out and I want to go for a walk, but I also want it to be productive. So for me, it's sticking a podcast on. So I'll name drop yourself. Gus Gonzalez is the MVP show. Also, Mark Smith on the MVP show. Gus Gonzalez for your CRM podcast. Like it's really great because I can go on my bike, go out for a walk, and I'm still learning stuff. I'm getting up to date, and there might be stuff that I need to go and do more reading later, but at the same time, it's just like I'm absorbing it in a way that I can't always do. Like I don't have to be at home sat in front of my computer. So for me, it's also a bit of like keeping things normal. I don't like to focus too much on the coronavirus and what's going on, and sometimes just that normal learning chat stuff like really, really sits with me.
I guess. Oh, gee.
Nick, do you have anyone? You're on mute, by the way.
I was on mute.
Yes.
Chris stole mine. I love following the stuff that Leon's been doing with his graphs. I've actually, it's funny because with this coronavirus, I don't know what it is, but I find that I have less time for podcasts. So it's actually in the last week or so, I had to go on a somewhat lengthy drive, so I was able to catch up on some of yours, as well as, are we allowed to mention the other ones? You know, the ones with let's I'm not gonna say worse, but just different audio quality over at CRM Audio. So I find their banter can be somewhat amusing as well. So I definitely love keeping up on the podcasts. It's a great way to keep informed about what's going on in the space. And so yeah, between them and like I said, Leon, I look forward to having his updates every day on my Facebook feed.
Yeah, he could be totally making this up, by the way, and I would totally believe it because he's like my number one source.
Did you see that he wrote a paper?
No.
So he apparently co-authored a paper with someone from Canada here.
That's Jeff. That's Jeff Locks.
No, it was with a professor, and what was really interesting is his first name was Robert. I forget what his last name was, but his last name actually includes a question mark at the end.
What?
Like I thought it was like a typo, but yeah, if you look up this guy, he
like an enigma.
Yeah, essentially he has a really common name. His first name's Robert. I forget what his last name is, but it's a pretty common last name. And so, yeah, he's like, yeah, if you ever just Googled my name, you'd never find it. So I added a question mark to the end, and Robert now you can
Smith.
find me.
Like Robert Smith?
Yeah, it's Robert Smith.
Question mark? Question mark?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, Robert Smith.
Yeah.
Well, I just found out that I've been spelling my name wrong my whole life. I went in to get my license renewed, and they said, "Oh, it's L.A. space B-A-R." I'm like, "What? I don't put a space in." I was like, "It is on your birth certificate," and I was like, "I guess my kids have a different last name than me now."
Has anyone checked the birth certificates for XRM Toolbox to see what the proper spelling is for that?
Jonas has. We're covered.
Okay.
Wow, that's interesting. I did get a lot of feedback though on the one of the last episodes of the podcast where we were talking about like 10 things that MVPs hate or don't like or whatever, and most of the feedback is about Daryl saying how he doesn't like other people creating stuff that is already on the community, and then like 2 sentences later talking about how he created the same thing that it was already on the community. So he was like, "What? Did you just say you hate when people do what you just did?" And he was like, "Yeah, that's exactly what he said."
I think we're missing the point there that I had already created that as well. I just hadn't released it. So I see that as slightly different.
Oh, I see.
So I'd already created it as well, and I was like, someone else did the same thing and did all this freaking work. Wow, I need to go meet him. And so Jordy and I had a conversation way back in the day because I was like, "Wow, this is crazy." Yeah. So I gave myself a pass on that, but yeah, I see how. Yeah, it's. I had a couple of 10 things just to talk on the phone on the conversation with you. So that was one I came up with.
I tried to paste the link in the window here. I don't know if it popped up on the screen or not for people to see it. Do you guys know how to pop it up on the window, out of the screen?
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
Everybody was typing.
Put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat in YouTube, I guess.
I did. Yeah, it's on the chat. So that's the link to the report.
To
YouTube
the Leon
page.
Tribe stuff.
Yeah.
In the YouTube page, though. Not on the Skype chat.
Hold on, going back over there.
Amy's taking care of it. You don't.
Thank you, Amy.
Oh gosh. I wasn't meant to press that.
You have to learn computers, Chris.
I got to go back to learn Skype.
Yeah, that was again that was a fun.
Zoom meeting due to security risk or something that I'm hearing about.
Yeah, exactly. I do wanna finish though because we have 5 minutes. I want to talk about again for the 10 viewers. Man, do we still have 10 people watching? That's awesome. I just want to mention again, if you are all new, if any of you is new watching still, donate.crmmvpmedia.com. That's where we're raising funds for the CDC Foundation. Hopefully we can get, close to $1,000. I hope so. And even with people re-watching this later, check that out as well. But one thing I wanted to close, with you guys is.
Well, real quick, how long will that link be open?
Well, I'm trying to remember when the expiration date is for the fundraiser, because I had to provide an expiration date, and I believe is May 15th. So It might be a few more days.
Cool.
Yeah. I do want to close the show by asking you guys, what are some of your advice for any people who want to become MVPs? Again, just in case the people who are watching this because they're like, I want to be there one day. I want to be on the other side, being in camera and getting all these awkward questions. What is your advice, for those who are watching and thinking about going for it? Maybe let's start with Amy, who's the newest one.
I was going to say,
Amy, what do you do? How do you do it?
Do what you love. You've got to be passionate about it and be consistent with it. And if you do those things and you're consistent and you love what you do, the MVP will just be a side effect of it.
Words of wisdom right there. I mean, you're not out here none of us said, I'm going to go take this career path and become an MVP. It came from a community love, a spirit, a sharing, a brotherhood, a family gathering. I mean, the relationships and the things that we all have gotten from this and the people that we've met around the world. I mean, I think that's your knowledge that you're sharing. And, I used to call it a 2 o'clock in the morning rule where, if I got a call, you get out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning to help fix the problem, you probably should have wrote it down or did something about it. Right. So it's the same thing with blogging. If you can save someone at 2 o'clock in the morning that's pulling out their hair to resolve a problem, then you're basically doing what MVPs do, right? And you're sharing and helping, and that's how you become one. So it's not a career path. It's not a test that you take. Doesn't mean you're the smartest person in the world, but it's the caring and the effort that you put into it that makes it what it is.
I would also say that it's okay to want it, because I do hear that if you just keep doing what you're doing, it'll come, blah blah blah,
blah blah blah,
blah blah blah.
So, whatever
blah,
Amy
blah,
said or whatever.
Yeah, blah blah blah.
It's the rudest I've ever seen a Canadian.
It is a bit of a game. There are rules. There are when Microsoft gets those submissions, there's certain things that they're looking for. So you do have to just if you're doing it just for the title, not going to work out. But at the same time, when I remember when I walked up to Joel Lindstrom, I said, "Hey, what you guys are doing, that looks like fun. How do I do that?" You don't just randomly just do whatever. If this is a goal of yours, it's okay for that to be a goal. There are things you can do that are better to do than that. So if you have 4 hours a week to do something, maybe diversify a little bit. Do different things. Microsoft cares about the impact that you're having. So if you spend that 4 hours doing something that you love but no one cares about, well, you're probably not going to get it. If you really don't. If you want the title, and again, I think it's okay to want it, talk to other MVPs. Generally, they have some insights onto, hey, maybe focus your energies over here as opposed to over here, because then you're more likely to get awarded. So I would say that if it's something that you want, that's okay. There's no shame in saying, hey, I want to become an MVP.
I think that you need to want it, right? I feel like, for me, I obviously I did it because I enjoy it. I still do it. I mean, I don't know if I overdo the whole MVP thing and put out a lot of content or whatever. I just enjoy doing it. So I think that I'm not going to say blah, 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 Amy. I think Amy was right on this. I think that you have to be passionate and all of that. However, I think you need to want it. And one thing that I've been doing, and again, this might be mean, and I mentioned this on another broadcast with Seth, was that, if you don't want it, I try to talk you out of it. I try to talk people out of it. Like, if you talk to me and you're like, hey, I want to be an MVP, how can I do it? I'm like, nah, you shouldn't do it. Because I feel that no one could have talked me out of doing what I enjoy, which is sharing with the community, writing blogs, teaching people how to upgrade or migrate from, Salesforce to Dynamics. Like, I would have done it anyway, regardless. So I feel that if you ask somebody what they need to do to be an MVP and they are able to talk you out of it, then you didn't want it, enough. I feel that with everyone in this call, I wouldn't have been able to talk you out of being an MVP. That's how I feel. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I feel.
And the people who do it just to get it don't realize that you have to continue doing it. So it's every year.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
It's not a lifetime award?
It's not a lifetime award. Every year you got to earn it. So I think that's how, some people have written books. I'm going to be an MVP, and then next year they're gone. So lots of things like that you get to see. But the people who stay around, do the speaking, join the webinars, be a part of the community voice, truly want to help are the ones that love it. And I agree. I think there is a wanting of it, but there's also a balance of what you deliver and what you do there.
Yeah, I would say you need to be who you are. Be who you are and have enough self-realization to know where you're going to make the biggest impact in the community. Nick Hayduk isn't going out and learning BI to do BI reports. That's not where his skills are. That's not where his talents are. That's not where he can make the biggest impact in the community. If it's coding, be a coder. If it's doing podcasts, be a podcaster. If it's blogging, be a blogger. If it's answering questions on the forums, do that. If it's organizing social events and community events, do that. Like, those are all things that we will need all the time, and we all have different gifts and abilities, and maximize what that is for the community. And you'll get the most enjoyment, personal satisfaction, I think, out of doing that. Which means that gives you the most longevity. And if what you're providing isn't enough to get that reward, then you can either keep on doing it or figure out something else that you enjoy to do. And yeah, it's not for everybody, but for those that it is, I mean, be who you are. Don't be the Joel Lindströms of the world. He's amazing, but he is.
I thought you were going to yell out, "Go Mark!" Be all you could be.
That was not a derogatory comment at all. Joel's amazing, and me, I'm like, I wish I could be like that, but no, that's wrong. I don't need to do that. I don't want to be. I wish I could know all that. No, that's not me. That's Joel. And be you.
I totally agree, Daryl. It's going with your strengths, right? Because you're going to excel at that already because you're already good at it. The other thing I always say, and Gus, I think I said this back on the first time you asked the question at the summit last year when you guilted me into going, is don't doubt what you can do. I mentioned the imposter syndrome because it's something I still struggle with, but put your stuff out there. You can't understand how many people you might help until you put it out there. So don't be shy. Don't hold back. Put it out there. Like I post stuff on portals a lot lately because that's what I've been working on. And I'm sitting here talking to Nicholas and it's, and Nick Dolman and Colin and all these guys who are just absolute gurus of this stuff. And I'm like, oh man, I can't. Then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put it out there and they can rip it to pieces for all I care. And the minimum, I'm going to hopefully help somebody and I'm going to learn something along the way. And putting that fear aside and having confidence in what you're doing, you're going to help somebody with what you put out there. And that's something that, again, took me a while to overcome. I've been at the business for a while and I finally, and I totally agree with Nicholas. I'm like, I want to be an MVP. This is some cool stuff. I want to be, part of that community because man, it's going to challenge me to learn so much more. So don't doubt yourself and use that to drive you as opposed to deter you.
Yeah. You never know kind of the impact you can have in the community. I mean, I share this tip that it was like a silly thing that I've been doing for a long time last week in the 2-Minute Tuesday where I said, look, every time someone asks me for a checkbox, I put a date field instead. I do that because I think it's more valuable. If you put a date in there, it looks like a checked box. And I also know when you did it. So that's the way I do it. And 500 people watched the video. 2 people created PCF controls, including Tanguy. Tanguy created a PCF control to make that better. Now, who knows how many projects will be using that free PCF control created by, arguably one of the most important developers in the Dynamics, in the history of Dynamics with the whole XRM toolbox and stuff. So something that might look super simple. Like, I already knew that. I was already doing that. I'm not helping myself by telling people that I'm doing this. I'm just putting this out there because it's something that I thought about in the moment, and now it could end up helping a bunch of people. So, like Jim said, just don't feel like, oh, this is kind of tiny, no one cares, because it might help a ton of people out there.
Hey, Gus, let's give him a shout out real quick for people who don't know who he is.
Who, Tangy?
Yeah, why don't you give him a little.
So Tangy, and I think Daryl should be the one doing this since he's in the
Go
inner
ahead,
circle.
Daryl. We're calling you out.
He's in the
Go
inner
ahead,
circle.
Daryl.
But Tangy is the creator of the XRM Toolbox, which is something that I think all of us use, and thousands of professionals around the world use. And Daryl and Jonas also are part of that inner circle of XRM Toolbox masters. So Tangy is definitely a special person, and I think we talked about a couple years ago about if there was an MVP for Life Award, who would you give it to? And I said Tangy. So I'm a really big fan, and the fact that he took my tip and created a PCF control, I was blown away. I didn't even ask for it. Last time I had to beg for something. This time it just happened, so that was great. All right, guys, thank you so much. All of you who are still watching, 13 viewers, so that's great, and thank you all for donating to the CDC Foundation. Donate.crmvpmedia.com, as I mentioned. I hope that we can do this again, maybe not raising funds, but I love to do Ask the MVPs and, getting your expertise out there. Those of you MVPs who participated in this session, obviously thanks to Microsoft as well, Ryan and Charles and Matt for joining and answering questions.
Totally.
Yeah, hopefully we get to do this again. And, if you want to know when this is happening, the best way to do it is just subscribe to the channel. I'm not the only one putting videos out there. There's videos out there by Daryl. There's videos. I think all of you have been on a video. I know Nick has been multiple times. Amy's the only one who hasn't been on the channel yet. But I need to get you, especially because you have a lot of sets around your house and a lot of places where you can record from. So get you into.
And Amy, if you're scared, I'll go with you. We could do a co-host show.
Exactly. The best way to do it is subscribe to the channel. You get alerts, when these stream happen or whenever any of the videos come out. But I'm just gonna turn it to you guys. Any final words before we close down the stream today?
Stay safe.
Absolutely.
I think awesome work, Gus. Thanks for making this happen.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So thanks for making it happen, and I hope we raise some money for charity, and it's been really good fun.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you guys so much. I apologize to George Dubinsky. He's been waiting on the lobby for 3 hours. We don't have time for him today. But we'll see you all